Zarathustra, who um, is so interested in Eastern religions in the way that I am interested in the Abrahamic faiths, which is what I consider to be, well, I mean, obviously organized religion. And I suppose the grass is always greener, perhaps. You think, wow, Eastern religions without their imposition and inquisitions and forcible conversions and you're probably thinking, Eastern religions, you just are part of it because you belong there.
Hmm.
Was it the beginning of your attraction for Eastern religions?
Whew, it's a big story, and so I think I'll just start at the beginning, if you'd like, and
Please do.
just try to be concise about it. So I was brought up in a very devout Catholic family. Um, I've always had a really, really strong religious streak in me. It just it's kind of my nature. I felt as if I could see God in the movement of the clouds and the swaying of the trees. As when I was like 5 years old, I wanted to be a priest. I just had a very, very strong connection with spirit, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a like the American dream, perfect suburban white community and happy family. Everything was fabulous. And then when I was 14, my father suffered a massive heart attack,
Mm-hmm.
and the it was a very traumatic experience for me and the family.
I'm
We
sure.
were told the first day that well, he won't live through the night, and then he lived through the night, and they said, well, he won't make it to the weekend, and then he won't make it into next week. We give him 2 weeks, we give him a month, and that lasted for 4 years. So 4 years of essentially trauma, I guess, from age 14 to 18 in your most developmental years as a young man, going from childhood to manhood,
Mm-hmm.
was just ripped my youth away from me. And it was a very tough experience. But
Mm-hmm.
what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Indeed.
And I was very shocked, and in the sense of like it affected my religious relationship with the church and God and in Christianity, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, we're the perfect family. How could you do this to us? Kind of, that was my teenage mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it set me on a path to reading as much philosophy and religion as I could. And
Mm-hmm.
poetry. I mean, I was, it's that kind of age where you're growing and experimenting. And I finally came across a book called Zen and the Birds of Appetite by Thomas Merton. So people interested listening to this can look that up.
Mm-hmm.
And also, a friend of mine, his father claimed to be a Taoist, and I was like, "What the heck is a Taoist?" So he lent me the Tao Te Ching, or Tao Te Ching as it looks in English,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the indigenous religion of China, as you would know.
It's more
And
philosophy, isn't it?
yeah, it's not the Tao Te Ching itself does not teach like methods of liberation. However, Taoism as a religion has extremely highly advanced esoteric meditation practices and the end goal of that there's two kinds of Taoism. There's essentially what you'd call family Taoism, which is every Chinese home and restaurant has an altar to various gods,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an ancestor worship essentially, which I think we would do well to have in the West, to be honest with you. I think that there's a continuity. Their relationship with ghosts and spirits are very, very real, and it's hard to explain without going off on a massive tangent on that. But having lived in Asia for 5 years and Taiwan for 4 years, I'm quite acquainted with that. Anyway, as first Taoism, yeah, so there's these very secret esoteric meditation practices for alchemy, and the end goal of that is immortality, but it wouldn't obviously be in the like the on earth. It would be immortality in the Taoist heavens.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, but Taoism, anyway, how that relates is that Taoism taught me about the like natural law, And I don't personally believe that any religion is in a sense true if it does not align with natural law. And by natural law, I mean cosmic law. I mean it's beyond gravity and the changing of the seasons. It's a there's a cosmology to this.
Can you give an example of what you understand by natural law?
Okay, so karma is probably the easiest
Cause and
thing to.
effect.
Correct. And it's I always think of, say, Buddhism and Eastern philosophy as highly advanced psychology. So and it's a kind of science. And so our science in the West has evolved, along a different path, and it is, to my knowledge, no spiritual core to it. It's more about physics and astronomy and blah blah blah. These the things that we use to build the modern world, to put a robot on Mars and to build cathedrals and things of that nature. So yes, it's highly philosophical, but it's in many ways more psychological, in that it's Buddhism specifically is the study of the mind, whereas Taoism is the study of all that is, that nature, and that your true harmony and happiness, progress, spirituality comes with harmony to nature. The yin yang symbol is describes the binary nature of the universe. Day and night, life and death, hot and cold, up and down, on and off. It's male, female. So
Mhm.
there's that. So when the two work beautifully hand in hand, and there's no real conflict between them. That's something that people in the West can't understand, is like the tolerance that exists in the East towards different gods and religions per se. So anyway, I don't know. It's so easy to go off on crazy tangents on this topic.
Mhm.
But so getting back to your question, why Buddhism? So I read Thomas Merton's book. Thomas Merton he's a Christian monk. I forget the exact path that he's on, but he's sort of a hippie LSD monk of the 60s. And a lot of Christians don't like him because of
Mhm.
that or whatever. But um, I didn't know or care about that. The book struck a chord in me, where I realized, when I finally understood what Zen was, I thought, this is totally natural to me. I feel at home in this. So there was never a sense of there was never ever a sense of rebelling against Christianity or hating Christians or any of that, which you commonly see in people who fall off of Christianity. There's this, well, I'm a Wiccan now, or I'm a pagan now, or it's a, and I'm not, I guess I don't mean to offend people on those paths. I recognize the legitimacy of indigenous European religions, and I am now studying those things, which do have Vedic relationships with Eastern philosophy, and that's another tangent. But I'm not in that mode of thinking of like a childish rebellion against Christianity. That's not me. So, and I'm just trying to cope with this oncoming death of my father,
Mhm.
and how I'm gonna go the rest of my life without a father.
Mhm.
And it was just terrifying. I lived in intense terror. I had experiences like, my father would have an episode and collapse, and I would hold him in my arms on the kitchen floor until the ambulance came, thinking, is this it? Is he going to die now? That was my teenage years.
Mhm.
So it's very unusual and very tough.
Did you have
But
siblings to help maybe share the burden?
can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Did you have siblings to share the burden of a gravely ill parent?
We all were in the same state of trauma, and my mom, after he died 1 month before graduating high school,
Mhm.
which is its own kind of tragedy. But she had a total and complete mental breakdown, and not just for a little while, but for years, medication therapy for years after this. So it's
Oh.
the economic devastation. I mean, it was a full atomic bomb on my family.
Mhm.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, all my sort of family and church friends, etc., were trying, of course, comforting us in the best way that they knew how. But the bottom line of grief and loss in this case is that you have to go through it. There's no way over it or under it or
Hmm.
around it. You got to freaking feel it. You got to grind right through that pain.
Yeah.
And at 18 years old, just on my way to college, like, I was catapulted into space, and I needed an anchor.
Hmm.
So Buddhism provided that. It gave me the meditation techniques, the cosmology, the philosophy, and it worked. That was the thing, is I needed something that worked. I didn't, I never, I hate the idea of begging to God. Oh God, please make the pain stop. Oh God, help me. Oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm begging you on my knees, groveling. That's not how I want to have a relationship with God. And that's not my relationship with God. And I still have a relationship with God. So that's a whole other topic. But
So what is
yeah.
the so as a Catholic, you're supposed to be appealing to God, but as a Buddhist, what kind of relationship do you have with God then?
Well,
Because Buddhism is essentially atheist, isn't it? As far as I understand
I
it.
absolutely not. That's the funny thing. Yes and no, in that, like, the Buddha recognizes God's small g of all kinds. He teaches to honor and respect other religions and other gods, and but that God's small g are there's something what they would call, you see it a lot in Buddhist art, where you see the wheel of life, and in the different spaces in between the spokes, that this is the wheel of reincarnation, and you can be born you can, like, Taoists would be reborn as gods, small g, if they finally meet that immortality. But even gods die according to Buddhism, but they could live for 1 million years and then die. And because of, I'm getting off track, that's very deep cosmology, but so there's a recognition and a use of relationship to gods and small g, and that but the point of Buddhism is to end suffering. It's a system. Think of it like, kind of like a spaceship that gets you to Mars, and it has all the right tools to navigate how to get there. But along the way, there's going to be comets and UFOs and asteroids and other planets and distractions and wormholes, and you just ignore all of that, and you just get to the destination. So when you reach the destination, is nirvana, or the absolute cessation of suffering. So it's a tool. Think of it that way. Along the way, it says, yeah, I check, I respect these gods and those gods over there, but the bottom line is, we we are being reborn eternally in a wheel of suffering, and we can do good deeds and be reborn as titans or gods. We can do bad deeds and be reborn as animals, ghosts, or hell beings. And the human form is the best form to be reincarnated in order to reach the end of suffering, to use this system of what's called Buddhism. So I know that it doesn't make God the goal per se. I don't. I think I'll stop there. I don't know. It's a difficult topic, but does that
Yes,
answer your question?
I'm a little curious as to why you didn't feel that Catholicism met your needs, apart from, well, asking for the pain to stop. But you're saying Buddhism helped you endure the pain, or get the pain to stop.
Well,
And
it's more than that. I mean, it's surviving and prospering. It's not just like a drug that, like, I'm going to ignore the pain. I'm just stating that. So Catholicism for me, at the time, I would say that, I mean, it's a beautiful culture. It's what I grew up in. I am a cultural Catholic, if you want to put it that way.
Mhm.
I'm a cultural Christian. I love my Christian brothers and sisters. Um, I've done tremendous amounts of research on the lost years of Jesus and the life of Christ outside of what the church teaches, have different views on who Jesus was, and what his true purpose was. But that's again another tangent. So
Mhm.
for me, just praying, and it didn't. There's no, to me, there's no technology to it. I'm talking about spiritual technology, and I really mean that. I mean, this is a term people need to get into their heads. They have to ask: is what I'm doing working, or am I just doing it to conform? Am I just doing it because I've always ever done it and everyone around me does it? What's the benefit? What is the trajectory? Am I growing? Is there measurable change in my life and who I am as a person? Am I evolving per se? So I didn't, and again, I was young, but you know, I found that I'm amazed at the spiritual technology of Buddhism and Taoism. So, does that answer your question? I don't know.
Well, I suppose there's this little thought bubble above my head that says theodicy, and I wonder if you um, did any research on that, which is, of course, the problem of evil, the problem of suffering in this life, which is a theological concept, I guess.
I would like to talk more with people who are more well read on that. I'm aware of these things, but I just found something that felt natural to me and had very clear answers and methodologies. Therefore, I grabbed it and I ran with it. I think that I do have to state, though, that it's extremely typical for Westerners to get lost in and be sold by Orientalism. And that is it's kind of like when you go to a Chinese buffet and you see the food, and then you look in the kitchen and the cooks are eating totally different food. Like they're selling you, it's like the martial arts schools that sell you the belts, and but yet you get beat up on the street. It's not, Orientalism is the fancy, attractive, amazing, beautiful culture of Asia and Buddhism, and it's a thing that that's a problem. I'd say that it's pretentious of Westerners to kind of wear the robes and what they call stink of Zen. That's an expression, like if you're faking it, kind of, and you're
Mhm.
doing it out of pride, and that's a big problem. And people on the right wing, that's all they see. They see these kind of fake new ageism, that people that wear the beads and namaste and the whole, like, I'm all peaceful. As soon as you say something off script with them, then their bipolar nature comes out and they call you Nazi. You know,
Right.
it's a total joke. And so, like, that kind of situation, we for people listening to this conversation, they have to set that aside, because that's not where we're going with this.
Mhm.
So, but to get back to what you're saying, I I I don't know enough about Christian theology and what are the methods of doing that. There are some parallels. Interestingly, Buddhism and Catholicism are compared a lot, but by Buddhists, not by Catholics.
Mhm.
And that's because of, like, for example, when you pray the Rosary, well, we have mantras and chants, and the sort of a Buddhist rosary that we use, and that triggers a trance state that is really, really healthy and positive. It kind of, I think people understand what that means, I guess.
Well,
But
chanting is a kind of self-calming thing, isn't it? In a way.
well, you have to look at. I want to put it this way: Buddhism, the very first thing that it does is it breaks down what is everything. Like, what is the mind, what is the body, what is perception, what is consciousness, what is the world, and how do all these things mix together and to make a human experience. And that's extremely philosophical, right? I think that's right. So once you understand that the mind is a kind of an organ, like the heart pumps blood, the stomach digests food, the mind manufactures meaning. The mind is a place where it's a kind of a tool that has emotions. It's this biochemical organism that stores information, and creates neuron networks that, when you use them long enough, they create a reality, and they perpetuate a reality, and how that then plugs into quantum physics and manifestation and karma. So I'm tossing out some major words here. If people are not familiar with these words, they might be confused. But do you understand where I'm going with this?
Um, if you will explain a little further,
Okay, okay.
perhaps I will understand.
Okay, I just don't want to assume that you know what I'm talking about. So, in you're talking about it calms the mind. Yes, that's extremely important because, we have, in a way, we have to master our minds. We have to recognize the bigger picture of how we relate to our own minds in reaction to events in our life. And we don't want to be a slave to our minds per se. We have to be able to use it as the tool of enlightenment and realization.
Do you
And
mean we don't want to be a slave to our emotions, perhaps?
and well, yes, there's more than that. We don't want to be a slave to our perceptions, to our senses. And this again is Buddhist teaching. I haven't attained that. I'm not an enlightened Buddha. I'm a very poor representative of Buddhism, but I'll try my best to explain what I know. So with that, you have to see that, okay, let's look at light, for example. There's a huge spectrum of light that we're aware of scientifically, but our eyes can only see a very small spectrum of light. There's a huge spectrum of sound, but our ears can only hear a certain small part of that. So that demonstrates to us that our tools of perception are extremely limited, and that reality is it's way bigger than what we can perceive.
Mhm.
So when this gets very difficult to follow because it's very amorphic, but with that understanding, it's not just, okay, something bad happened and I'm just going to stay calm. You know,
Mhm.
you, like, for example, I studied Shaolin Buddhism. I studied Shaolin Kung Fu at a Shaolin temple in New York City. It's called the Overseas Temple of Shaolin. It's in
Mhm.
Queens. Anyway, here I am studying, like, you know, Oxford level Kung Fu, like the top Kung Fu school of the world. And I'm asking the monk who is famous, this big deal guy, and I'm saying, wait a second, you're teaching Buddhism, which is, don't harm anybody and don't kill and peace and all this stuff, but yet you're teaching us how to maim and kill people, with this kung fu.
Mhm.
How do you justify this? What's going on here? And he explained that, you know, this is the thing that Westerners have, like, oh, the peaceful Buddhist. No, the warrior Buddhist. The warrior monk is a major archetype in this world, and so he's explaining, if we didn't do this throughout the ages, the teaching of Buddhism would have been erased in history. So, you know, we are living in this world, and there's war, there's fighting, killing, there's tragedy, politics, there's all this stuff. And we're not trying to escape that. We're trying to survive it in order to carry on the message generation after generation. Does that make sense?
So I'll try to frame it in a way that I think I understood it, which is that there are all these Buddhist principles, and sometimes you have to defend them to the death.
Sure, for sure. Yeah. It's interesting. The culture of the samurai in Zen Buddhism is very famous and very beautiful, extremely beautiful poetry. I think that if racialists in the West can look past that and see these principles of the warrior heart or the warrior spirit. People who study martial arts in Japan, for example, consider Western martial artists ninja and samurai too. That's just a word. These are just Japanese words. There's English translations to these words. So we have to move aside that Orientalism and see the kind of the spirit of it, and the kind of the natural law of the warrior monk, if you will. I would say maybe the Crusaders were samurai, if you want to put it that way. So I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to go off on these fanciful, you know, ideations. I don't know enough about the Crusades, and that's massively different, historic
They
from.
thought they were fighting for God anyway, whether
So
they were or not.
from yeah, from their perspective, perhaps
Mm.
there was something there. And I would say that today Christians need to take on the warrior spirit like like super fast, because the circumstances. That I mean, how many churches are being burned down in Europe, the invasion of Islam, the Jewish insurrection in our governments, globalism, the whole thing. Christianity is obviously targeted. They need to pick up the sword. They need to revive that crusader spirit like now, in order to save themselves,
But
and
it
like
seems that there is one thing, you can't have one thing without the other. So you need the principles that you have to at least be prepared to defend, verbally at least. And unfortunately, I don't think people even know what a principle is because it is never defended. Even those that are protected by the American Constitution, supposedly, you know, acts that are supposedly legal, they suddenly get declared illegal,
yeah, yeah.
with no due process, and everybody just submits to it.
Well, that's the sheep uh, mentality that I think, unfortunately, Christianity today has, and that's why it's failing. And that the kind of
Because
I
it
always
has
say,
no principles. I think that is really the problem. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, if we go back to Christianity, we'll get our mojo back, kind of thing. And
hmm
I thought,
hmm
well, there was a reason why it failed.
hmm
And if people don't understand why it failed, they won't solve their problem. Because there
well,
was a reason why you moved away from Catholicism,
oh
was
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh my God, yeah. So I mean, I might be a tiny molecule example of the whole change of this time, and how Christianity, and I don't know if it's Christianity or Christians though. Is it the people, or is it the system, religion? You see,
well, I think
that's
it must be the system because, I mean, if you go back to it, there was a time when Christians were fully prepared to commit
mm,
acts of
mm,
terrible violence, not
yeah,
against not just against non-Christians, but against each other for, straying into heresy.
yes, you're correct
People,
about that. Yeah,
lots of, white Christian people were burnt at the stake for
yeah, yeah.
denying the divinity of Jesus. And
I understand.
presumably that was how
Hmm.
the governments kept Christians Christian. And
Yeah.
then it seems that they lost the will to do it after the Enlightenment, after the French Revolution,
Hmm.
after
Hmm.
liberalism, and it seemed that they thought, well, whatever is moral is legal,
Yeah.
but if what is legal keeps changing from generation, well, year to year, actually,
Hmm.
then what moral basis is the Western system because it's not Christian anymore? I
Yeah.
mean, and I think, to be Christian, you have to say, well, I am Christian, and therefore I believe that Jesus is God.
Hmm.
And you won't be able to find people who sincerely believe that. Of course, you'll find people who say, I'm prepared to say that to be one of the gang.
Hmm. Hmm.
But, I mean, apart from that, there is no moral basis there,
Wow.
which I think explains the strength or the apparent ascendancy of
Yeah.
Jews and Muslims, because they have a system, they know what their principles are supposed to be. It's how we recognize these people, like they keep the Sabbath, they avoid pork, they avoid alcohol, the things they're supposed to do and the things they're not supposed to do. And that is what defines them as a people.
Hmm.
And
It's I'm sorry. I do have to say, well, first of all, I don't have a dog in this fight. Would I would direct you towards people that are really, really, really articulate and knowledgeable about these topics. And you probably have already talked to a lot of people like that. But, as far as I can't, I have my own struggles with Christianity, Jesus, God, these various things. Not so much with God, but specifically with Jesus. In that I'm trying to find what is it that he really taught. I think Anyway, I don't know how far you want to go into that
Oh,
topic, but
I'm actually very interested in your journey from Catholicism
okay,
to Buddhism. I would say this is the whole point of the of a conversation. So go into as much detail as you want because um, I think that's the purpose of the exercise.
right. Um, well, first of all, is the audio okay over here? Is there any everything going fine as far as audio?
I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, because my my neighbor just turned on his lawnmower, and I'm like, not
Oh,
now,
I can't hear that. I
Oh,
can't hear
good.
that,
Okay,
but I
okay,
can
then
hear you
we're fine.
loud and clear.
So okay, so we're getting some karmic challenges right now here, but I'm kidding. So the transformation from Catholic to Buddhist. Okay, think of my father's death and the immediacy of him of mortality pushed right into your face as a teenager, and then college, right? And that the struggle of watching my mom have a complete breakdown, the financial collapse, all these traumas simultaneously, and being a young man who's really not honestly equipped to handle these things.
Hmm.
So I just I found myself just like for starters feeling betrayed by Jesus, I guess, or God, and
Hmm.
then the whole begging and crying and begging and crying. I'm like, this is going nowhere.
Hmm.
And then I had to reach out and find something else that worked, and you know that was
That
Buddhism. So
reconciled you to your situation.
well, there's no, I wouldn't say that it consoled me. That's definitely not. There was, I mean,
Reconciled made you
oh, I'm sorry.
accept. That's what I meant because I was thinking, well, you could be Buddhist and the same thing could have happened to you too. Is kind of what
Absolutely.
I was thinking.
Well, sure. I mean, that's
You
the
could have
funny
been
thing.
Buddhist already, before all
Well,
that.
okay, you're bringing up a fascinating point because I lived in Asia for 5 years. Lived in New York City for 3 years. I've had many deep friendships with many people from Japan, Korea, China, Thailand, etc. And many of them are Buddhists, and when I talk about Buddhism with them, they have. I've noticed a lot of them really have kind of a shallow. It's just one of these things you're born into. You don't question it. You do the rituals, you do the holidays, you
Mm.
follow the basic rules, but there's no really, deep esoteric experience of it, which honestly only monks really have. It's very. That's part of why I won't say I've abandoned Buddhism. I am. It's in my blood now. It's woven into my DNA now, but I don't practice it because if well, let me back up. I practice it to the degree that I can. The point being that if you're not a monk and you don't go full on into Buddhism, you will not achieve enlightenment. You have to do it. And not only that, you may have to be a monk for many lifetimes to do it. It's freaking hard. It's very, very hard to do.
So
So,
enlightenment is not a permanent state, isn't it? You reach enlightenment and then it darkens again,
well,
doesn't
okay.
it? I mean, it's not a permanent state of, you know,
Well,
lifetime
yeah, right.
enlightenment.
Okay. By not knowing what a thing is, not being able to define a thing, it's kind of scary to us. We just think it's this void of darkness, and ooh, that's like kind of infantile. We shouldn't do that. We have to think through the whole thing. So, I would say that it's super consciousness. I would say that in a way you probably merge with God forever, and you never are reborn again. That would be the Western way to understand
That's
it.
nirvana, right?
Yeah, I think that's the best Western explanation for that. The Buddhists wouldn't describe it that way, but my through my journey and my research of East and West and the whole thing, that's what I would call it. But that's my definition of God. I think is a bit different than many Westerners, in that I think of God as the sum total of all consciousness, and that consciousness itself is reality that produces the physical world, that manifests the physical world, and not only the 3D physical world, but many other dimensions, 4D, 5D. They say that there's no dimensions past the 12th dimension. How would they know that? I don't know. I couldn't say that, but
Yes.
it's like the good news is this. So as you study Buddhism specifically, and you learn about various monks in history and their accomplishments, they're it's like if somebody goes to the moon and then they come back and they say, okay, these are the things that I saw, these are the things that I did, experienced, and I've got a couple photographs, some video, and you would trust what they say because they're the only man who went to the moon. You know what I'm saying? And so these monks go, they're able to astral project, they're able to visit heavens, they interact with spirits and demons and Buddhas and gods, and then they come back into their physical manifestation by walking through these other dimensions through meditation. And here's the kicker: anybody can do this if they do the damn work. If they sit down, break their ego, get rooted, and then take off on this spiritual journey, because the map is laid out, the tools are laid out. You, it's like you it sounds fantastical to Westerners. We don't want to believe it because it challenges everything we know or what we were taught. And so there's this ego resistance. No, it can't be true. That's all science fiction. Okay, do it. And then tell me what you find out. Go to the moon and then come back and tell
But
me
it
it's
sounds
not
like
real.
such a long journey, which
That's
might.
that's why I said only monks can really accomplish these
Who
things,
have the
because
time to meditate, X number of hours a day?
you have to, so you've got to abandon your entire normal existence and go into the monastery. And there's you've
That
got
would
Hindu.
upset the missus.
Exactly. You can't put the kids through college doing that, can you?
No.
It's yeah, that's why, but you have to try to measure it like this. The measurement of the sacrifice you make is the measurement of what is not even, I don't know. I'm trying to like do an opposite mirror here. Like what you gain and what you lose have an equal kind of a thing, where you gain a whole new life, like a life that is beyond the definition of life that we know. And primarily that's through understanding and living in the cosmology of true law, true natural law. So I
Mm.
know that I'm getting esoteric here, but I hope that this makes sense.
Well, my next question is whether you have met anyone who has made that journey.
Many people, many people. That's the whole kind of point of it, is that you the whole sort of guru slash lama slash master, whatever word you want to use, that whole master student relationship is codified very hard into Buddhism. So if your teachers are not legitimate if they cannot trace their lineage back to the historic Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha in India. If you cannot trace your direct lineage back to him, you're a charlatan. And so that's kind of one of the laws of, if you would call, the Church of Buddhism. So, and there's people out there that that do that. There's fake Buddhism in Japan that they just exist to get a tax write-off. So like there's humans corrupt things. They do
Mhm.
these things. But so, I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with many different monks. When I Okay, so in college I did a year exchange program in Japan. I studied. For the first time, I actually learned and practiced Zen Buddhism in Kyoto, in the temples
Mhm.
in Kyoto. I, of course, was studying the scripture. I don't call them scriptures of Buddhism, and the whole is just like kind of the beginning of my real root in it. And then when I came back to America, I went and moved to New York City. I joined Shaolin Temple. I was the victim of a home invasion, and I was assaulted, and I
Oh.
decided I have to learn martial arts, and that led me to Shaolin, which I
Mhm.
didn't know Shaolin's relationship to Buddhism and history and all these things.
Mhm.
Um, so that was a beautiful karmic tie-in, how that threaded together.
Mhm.
Uh, so moved to New York, did that, and while I'm going to Shaolin, I'm teaching English and Japanese and Chinese companies.
Mhm.
So it was just, for me, an absolute joy, an extraordinarily enriching experience. It was a golden age for me. And I was finally calming down. All that anxiety and grief and pain was like settling down in the sense that not a sort of escape from it, but rather a coming to terms with understanding life and death, who I
Mhm.
am, my father, everybody, everything, and feeling at peace that I have no attachment. I'm not afraid of death anymore. You see, and the only thing now that I'm concerned about is my son. I want to live long enough to provide for him and teach him these things. But I don't think most people have gone through that gate. Then death forces people to go through it, and many will go through it and come out an alcoholic, or something else. They don't ever really cope with death, and in the sense that Buddhism makes you understand it, that it's not a bad thing. So again, I
Well, in
went
that
on
it
a
is
tangent.
inevitable,
Yeah, it
and to be
it
prepared
points.
for.
Yeah, it points to the whole purpose of Buddhism, which is that the core teaching, the very beginning of Buddhism, is the idea that life is suffering. Now, if you just argue that point alone with any Westerner or anybody, I guess,
All
there's a
desire is suffering, surely.
exactly.
That.
Although, like, that's the funny thing, like, the only desire a Buddhist is supposed to have is the desire for enlightenment. So, like, even that is a tool. You figure you have to cross the river and you don't have a boat. Well, you got to chop down some trees and tie them together with some twine, and you got to navigate the rocks, and you have to take the tools of what you have
Mhm.
in both in reality and in your mind and in your body. So there's so I guess I just want to go flying off on these tangents, but so help me out here. Where are we going with
Um,
this? We're
well, you were saying that being Buddhist made you
I'm sorry.
fear death
Okay.
less
No, no.
than as a
Life is
Catholic.
suffering. Yeah, life is suffering. So as a Catholic, I think I did, the old sort of good dog, bad dog, you get a treat or you get punished kind of mentality. And it's it's not a bad thing in the sense that, like, but I think it's infantile in a way. Whereas in Buddhism, it's not God's going to punish you, but you are going to punish you. Once you recognize the law of karma, and you understand your the desire, the nature of the mind, desire, the nature of your body, perception, these things, you start to grow up and mature spiritually and realize it's my own thoughts, actions, and deeds that cause my pain and the pain of others. And this creates karma that can last forever and come back. You do pay off your karma, and you can erase karma. And many kinds of karma are dormant until the conditions arise where the karma can flower. So like many people say, like, why is it that this guy's a total jerk, but he's rich and famous and he's got all these wonderful things? Well, the conditions are not yet ready for his bad karma to pay off. So and then you might have like something bad happens to you, and then you react to it. So there's the
It ain't
crux.
what it ain't what happens to you. It's how you react to
React to it.
it.
Correct.
Mhm.
So that's an adult approach rather than a childish approach, where I'm going to keep doing naughty things until I get caught. And then oh, I'm in the doghouse. I got in trouble. I'm being punished. I'm angry and sad, and then that anger and sadness just drives your desire to do more bad things. That's childish. That's a childish spirituality, and we should be better than that. We deserve more than that. And I don't know that that's Christianity, but it, I think, is the one that I was taught, or the way that I was taught. Or maybe I wasn't intellectual enough to understand true Christianity. I don't blame Christianity. It didn't work for me. That's all I have to say. And I'm
You
glad it
find it
works for
hard to
others.
believe. It sounds. to me that you find Christianity hard to believe, but Buddhism more in conformity with how you perceive the world.
I'm going to
Would
cut
that
to
be?
the I'm going to cut to the point here. I'm going to kind of go around all that and get to my understanding of Jesus is that he's if he is the most important man in world history, why don't we know anything about his life between age 13 and 30? Dramatic pause. So there are documents of him. There's historic documents and evidence of him traveling to the east, going to India, China, Tibet, and coming back, to Israel, that area, Middle East, and teaching. And it's if you read the Gospel of Thomas, if you look into Gnosticism, if you look into even Hermeticism, and that whole side of things, then you start to see that his language is coded. You have to try to imagine, he has both the Romans and the Pharisees against him, and he could, him and his followers, he's trying to liberate them, and so he's a danger. He's a threat to the political system, and I don't want to go off on that whole thing, but my understanding of Jesus is that really he was a kind of a Buddha in my mind, or a super yogi, somebody who was able to manifest anything in reality through his will, loaves and fishes, water to wine, walking on water, miracles. And his message was that, everybody has the Christ spirit in them, that the second coming of Christ is your own enlightenment. It's not me coming back, which in itself would be a reincarnation. But so that's my understanding of Jesus, and I know that Christians are going to be doing backflips over that. But it's like if I say, okay, fine, read the Gospel of Thomas, read the Gnostic uh, scripts, they won't read them, and I'm like, okay, well then there's no discussion then. If we're going to criticize Buddhism but not try it, then there's no discussion. If until you go, you don't know. So I don't claim to know everything about Christianity. All I know is, what I know, and I don't know what to say. I mean, I suspect that Christianity is a Jewish psyop in many ways. I feel as if that Jesus is like Jesus and Christianity are two totally different things in my mind. And I would love to learn his teachings, but they're so hidden and crushed and cut off
Well,
and
it's
and,
not in
and
the New
secret.
Testament, is it? I mean, if you read the Sermon on the Mount, you think, well, I don't know. Do you think so? This is the distillation of the wisdom of Christianity. It seems to me a little meager.
Again, I'm no representative. There's far greater people. I could recommend people for your show that
Hmm.
are brilliant and articulate. Tyler Hamilton, Gaius Nullis. There's been even more people that are super bright on being able to talk about that. I
Hmm.
can't, so I just don't. I can't go there. But
Hmm.
anyway, so for me, again, it just sort of boils down to how do you do it? What's the method? I want to know the freaking method. If you remember when you didn't know how to drive a car, and you were learning to drive, like, oh, this is weird and hard and scary, and then eventually now it's second nature. You don't even remember driving to work, So
Yeah.
I couldn't find a method that was clear other than just believe in me and follow the Ten Commandments. And now that I know everything about the Jews and the whole globalist Zionist program, and I I look at Christianity with extreme suspicion because of that. And so that's where I'm kind
Hmm.
of looking around it and saying, well, what else do we know about. And so I would say start with the Gospel of Thomas, and
Hmm.
you'll be on the path to maybe realizing Jesus the Buddha.
What about Islam? I mean, since we're talking about the Abrahamic faiths, and you were talking about the Jews, and of course, Islam comes to mind. Did you ever inquire into the workings of Islam as opposed to the workings of Christianity, as opposed to the workings of Judaism?
Well, as you know from our conversation on my show, American Zarathustra, that my experience of Islam is essentially almost entirely understand, terrorism. It's although I have a very interesting thing to share. I worked as an art teacher in a school in a Muslim community that was partially run by Muslims, and the student population was about 35% Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
There were Arabic teachers there, Muslim teachers, etc. And so I for 3 years, I was fairly intimate with the local Muslim community, and
Mm-hmm.
I have way, way more experience with that community, which are primarily from Yemen. So I don't, I'm sure they're different from Malaysian Muslims in some sense, or culturally.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
so my point is that when you gain the trust of these families and these teachers, they tell you things they're not going to tell other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that all over this community, there's houses where one man has, three wives and 10 kids, and they're practicing polygamy. I know that, they're sending money back home, and that money's probably going to nefarious situations that I can't prove, but I'm pretty clear that it's implied what's happening. I know that they are, building. They're using the same program that they've done with all their other invasions of all other countries. They're doing it in the West, and which is slow, bring it in, be nice, play the victim, get into positions of power, and then force their hand, and et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
you're aware of these things, I'm sure. And then, of course, with the decline of Christianity in some sense, this is a nightmare for Western civilization. So I see my understanding of Islam between that certain studies on their political ideas and the facts of just what's going on politically. To me, Islam is an invader ideology. It's not a religion or a spirituality. And so you could probably tell me, yes, it is, and then show me what it is. And that would be great. But to me, all of that is counterbalanced and erased by the terrorism and the ideology of the sword, the convert or die. So that's that. I don't know what.
Right, right. I mean, I suppose I would say that, and I think you earlier kind of pointed it out about these warrior monks, that
Hmm.
all religions are fundamentally about law and war.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, true.
So at some
Well,
point you will, there will be people who will attack you because of your religious identity,
okay.
and you will find yourself having to defend yourself.
You're making a really, really critical point about the difference between the Abrahamic faiths and Eastern religions, if you want to call them that. There is nothing anywhere inside Buddhism or Taoism that says go, kill your neighbor to force him to become a Buddhist or a Taoist. It's the total opposite of that. Whereas Christians, Jews, and Muslims all have done that, and so it's
Because
somehow
they're
woven.
organized religion,
Yeah.
and people tend to organize themselves for war and
Hmm.
imperialism.
So this starts to become the question of government versus religion, and how all that works together. So
Well,
um,
governments need religion, I
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, 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 yeah. I just want to point out that there's nothing coded inside Buddhism or Taoism that says you must go out and convert the world. It's that doesn't exist. So whatever, Japan during World War II, they did the government used Buddhism as a tool to kind of, do what governments do to sort of like create a certain kind of indigenous nationalism and somehow make it okay that we're going to go into China and absolutely brutalize in a vicious way this and take over their, that's imperialism. It's not Buddhism. But governments have a way of doing this, right? They have the weapons. They've got the knife to your throat, the gun to your head. Oh, now this is Buddhism. The state is redefining it. So that's not real Buddhism. So let's be fair to, say, Islam and Christianity and Judaism and say, where is the true spirituality of those religions? I would like to know, and I'm not going
When
to.
you say spirituality, what do you
Yeah.
really mean?
Okay, this is clear. It's or rather an important thing that needs to be discussed. So to me, religion is man-made, spirituality is divine. So we, you know, let's put it this way. Spirituality is the point of religion, and religion is not the point of religion. You know, the cathedrals and the popes and the gowns and the giving the bread and the wine, and those are rituals that play a role in acquiring or manufacturing spirituality. Spirituality defined by Jews and Buddhists, I mean, that probably quite different, and definitely seen through an ethnic lens, a racial lens, in the West at least. Um,
I suppose when you say spirituality, I need to kind of get you to define it. Do you mean morality? Do you mean conscience when you say spirituality?
so it's funny because it's actually a very, very simple thing, but it's somehow difficult to articulate. So for me, no, I don't want to say for me, that's too subjective. Spirituality is when you experience the divine, when you transcend your human, uh, what's the word? The mundane reality of being human. You know, so it's your our bodies are just kind of three-dimensional spaceships that we submerge into the underworld of the human life, and then our spirits move on after the body vehicle is done. It cannot, by its own nature, live eternally like the spirit can. And so we can't, when we're attached to our bodies and the physical world, which we all are. So this world is delusion and illusion according to Buddhism. And I can go off and explain all that. It's fairly complex, but I can explain it. And so spirituality is the transcendence of the mundane world. And so, Christians are going to define it this way, Islam will define it that way. And there's got to be some validity in all of these things because, like, the Jews are not the chosen people. They do not have exclusivity to God and divinity and spirituality. We all do. We all
Oh,
do.
of course, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I would define spirituality as the good feeling you get when you think you're doing the right thing.
See, in all respect, I feel that that's only a fraction of what it is, because you can feel good about, like, oh, I saved a cat, or I adopted a pet, or I helped my neighbor take out his garbage, and that's not spirituality. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the kind. So, for example, coming to terms with death and being joyful about it. That's spirituality. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's profoundly different from doing good deeds, which are great. Nothing wrong with that. And you can experience spirituality through, pouring tea, or like listening to the birds chirp or smiling to a neighbor.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be so, woo, profound or whatever. It can be. That's kind of the beauty of Zen Buddhism in Japan specifically, is they make an art out of simplicity, simple spirituality.
Mhm.
But does that is that clear? Or
Yeah, yeah. So you're saying spirituality, true transcendent spirituality, resigns us to our own extinction.
extinction? This is a funny word. Extinction. So let's. It's really sad that all the words of Eastern philosophy don't really sound that great in English, and that we don't actually have words that translate to these ideas. So, like, in Buddhism, you will read, and you can pick up any book on Buddhism. It's the extinction of suffering and the extinction of desire. Extinction's an ugly word. It's like, oh, this.
It means the end.
It means death.
Mhm.
It means annihilation. It's nihilistic. It's a
But if you
nihilistic
believe
word.
in the afterlife, then I guess you can look at it in the face and say,
Well,
okay.
the
But
afterlife.
my physical extinction does not mean
Okay,
the
okay.
utter annihilation of my existence, because there is an afterlife which we are meant to believe in.
So in Buddhism, they have this concept of what they call the bardo, and bardo are the different channels or manifestations of your spirit throughout the cycles of being. So, like I was talking about, the ghost realm, the animal realm, the Titan realm, the demigod realm. Uh, you know, these are different bardos, and so you when you this life now here is a bardo. When you die, you pass through to another bardo, and the point of it is that when you recognize that they're all different kind of spacesuits that you wear to travel through existence, then you don't become attached to one or the other. And I guess so. So extinction to me doesn't, in a way, exist because you're just reborn in another form. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Yeah.
Yes,
Now,
yes, but because
now
if you do believe in an afterlife, then you would not fear
it's just
death.
another life. It's just another
Mm.
life. You don't. So you, anyway, and from a multidimensional perspective, people in the fourth dimension can perceive the third dimension, but people in the third dimension can't perceive the fourth dimension. Although I don't know, that's a tricky topic. I think I'll stop
Well,
there.
actually, this reminds me of a book called Flatland. I don't know if you've heard
Oh,
of
that's
this
a
book by.
fantastic. Yeah, that's a fantastic analogy. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
great! You're one of those rare people who have read it and enjoyed it.
I'm I'm aware of the
You're
concepts.
aware of it.
I didn't read the book, but I
You must read
understand the
it. You
concepts
must
of it.
read it. It's
You
very
know,
short anyway, and it's
yeah,
got those amusing
I
illustrations.
right. I think I've like listened to an audiobook of it at some point.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but it's a fantastic analogy or parable that people on a spiritual quest should look at, and even not. That understanding multidimensional reality is a key to our spiritual evolution, and even just daily life, and kind of interacting with ourselves and reality. But I know that's vague and kind of pompous almost to say these things without explaining them or going into them. But meditation goes into them. That's why I urge people, you know, get out of the theory and get into the practice. Westerners specifically, they have all these little alleyways along the path that they get lost down. They're because we're very ego driven. Everybody's ego driven, but Westerners, I think, are super ego driven.
Hmm.
And a lot of us, we fall down the dead end of uh, being in love with factoids, like knowing everything about something and being able to rattle off fantastic amounts of information and esoteric, fancy words in Hindi and Chinese or Tibetan and all this, and impressing the hell out of everybody, but actually not being spiritual at all, really. Still being mundane.
Would you
And
like to?
go ahead.
Uh, I was going to ask you to share with us your methods of meditation.
Oh boy. Okay, so mm, I'll just talk about what I do. I'm not a teacher. I don't
Hmm.
want people to listen to this and say like, "Oh, the great teacher Donald." He's not. No, that's just these are the things I do for myself,
Hmm.
and anybody can go out and learn any of these things. So, for starters, Zen meditation. Zen is the root of all meditation, and what that Zen is just the Chinese, sorry, the Japanese word for meditation, and it simply means empty to get your mind to the point where thoughts cease to arise, and or both, that when they do arise you are not attached to them. You do not see yourself in your thoughts. Rather, your thoughts are passing clouds, and you're just sitting back in your lawn watching them go, and you would never grasp a cloud. So once you do that, you begin to recognize, wow, I'm not my thoughts. I'm my consciousness. And what is this consciousness? What this is a kind of the ground of being. It's a neutral zone where anything can arise.
Hmm.
Once you have settled down, and it takes time to do that. You in Zen you count your breaths to 10. Breathe in, breathe out. 1. Breathe in, and it's tedious at first. It's very hard to do. But then after time and effort, it gets easier and easier and easier. And then when you're when let's say you're at work and your boss is screaming in your face, you can enter a Zen state and be completely neutral. You won't feel any of that stress. You won't react negatively to the stress. And then your boss will look at you like, what's going on? And then he'll change because you've created a new space with your energy through doing
Mhm.
that. It's amazing what you can do, and then you unlock all these psychic abilities that are insane. And so I've had many paranormal experiences. I'm afraid to talk about them because people will think I'm crazy. But
Oh,
like I,
please do, just to give us an idea
uh,
of the possible
really,
rewards that one could get.
this is the thing I've been agonizing over about this interview, is like, how much should I reveal? And I'm,
As
I don't
much as
know.
possible, she said in a self-interested way.
I'm scared to say it because there's going to be those that'll be like, click
We
off.
always knew you were crazy, and now
They're going to
we
file, yeah,
know.
put yep, put him in the crazy file. Okay, case closed. Like that's done. Astral projection. Um, I was I saw I don't know. This was the most terrifying experience of my life, and I was in a 7.1 earthquake in Taiwan, where
Mhm,
I almost died. So that it was more terrifying than that.
mhm.
I don't know how to explain this, but I basically saw a kind of a spirit being, that I called upon this being, and it manifested. And I don't know. I don't really want to talk more about it because it's too harsh. I mean, it wasn't a
Well, wait,
negative.
and it protected you, or somehow
It
calmed you,
it
or
taught
something.
me. It taught me something that's like, I'm not doing enough with my life to attain what I have to attain, and it's just too much. So
Mm. Well, I don't know. I think i- in times of great fear, I think must be something in psychology textbooks. We can see things that we normally wouldn't see, or think thoughts we don't normally think. I mean, this whole it's supposed to be a cliche where when time slows down, and you see your entire life going before your eyes. That's a common phrase for people who think who had thought they were about to die. Like,
it's yeah. There's wonderful studies on people who and you can look this up. It's very easy to find about people in hospice that they know they're going to die. They're very close to death, and they're visited by family spirits, their husband, their wife, their grandma, whatever. And it turns out that that's a very natural thing, and it happens. So that's fascinating. This particular experience, though, was way more intense than that. But I just I'm gonna have to. I'll get back to my methods of meditation. Um, so there's many methods. That's what's wonderful about Buddhism and Taoism, is there's so many methods that you can find. So I combine chanting. There's something called Pure Land Buddhism, which was created by a disciple of the Buddha, Amitabha Buddha, where you essentially, it would say Hail Amitabha like over and over and over. Um, but the thing is, it doesn't mean anything if you don't know who Amitabha is and what his teachings and his devotion is, and you call upon that for your aid, your salvation, your help. And salvation in this sense means enlightenment, not like Christian salvation.
mhm,
And so I combine that. I combine qigong. So qigong is Chinese yoga.
mhm,
They call it energy work. Um, all qi is a Chinese word for essentially uh, the quantum physics. It's the level of quantum physics where everything is on a subatomic energy level,
mhm,
which this energy exists everywhere all the time. In Western science, we would call it bioelectric energy. It's the synapses in your brain. It's the electricity in your nervous system. But it can also be found in food and air and water, and you know it's in a
mhm,
sense of what in Hinduism they call it prana. So if you're into Hinduism, you can understand it that way.
mhm,
Life force. So if you took all the chemicals that make the human body and put it in a bathtub, it doesn't make it a human being. It's like, so you have to have these. So there's chakras in the body. You throughout thousands of years of yogis and Buddhas and etc., they've come up with different methods to create an internal alchemy where you first charge up your body with this energy, the chi energy, and then you move it around to different chakras or different organs in your body,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then you transmute that chi energy. It's like it's alchemy. You you change it, you process it. Think of it that way. Like, how do you process raw crude oil from the earth into a plastic toy? There's
Hmm.
this, or gasoline. There's a process it has to go through. Same thing with your chi. You process it through your organs and your chakras, and then you cycle it into the greater cycle. I'd have to have graphics in front of me to show you all these pieces, but and then
Hmm.
it enters into your nervous system, and then you get a kind of a high, I guess. And I mean,
Hmm.
I that might be a bad choice of words because people think, oh, you're just doing it to get high. No, that's not what it is. It makes you can extend your life very long. You can do all kinds of things. It's healing. A lot of it is just general health, right? But for me, I use it to then plug into God. So if you try to imagine, every one of us is in a sense like a radio signal, like a radio tower.
Hmm.
Well, doing qigong, you could become like 1,000 radio towers, and then you plugged right into God, and you just exist in the divine, in light. And it's a super, talk about high. that's the
Hmm.
you know that's a whole new definition of high. So when you do this, it energizes you, it cleans you out, it cleans your mind, it cleans your karma. And then when you go on to your mundane life, where you go to your job and your family and you go this and that and the next thing, you handle these things with compassion and equanimity because you're more Buddha like, you're more Christ like in your behavior. And you're not faking it. You're not doing it because a book told you to, or you're trying to impress your friends or something. It's a genuine alchemy change in your body. But the problem I feel with this is that it's also like dieting. If you don't continue doing it, you'll lose the effects, and you will atrophy back into the mundane world. So that points right back to what I was saying about, if you don't go into the monastery and abandon the world, you'll never get full enlightenment. Because the way the third dimension is, and the way our bodies are built, is we'll entropy back into these lower states if we don't enlighten ourselves to these practices and the true nature of reality.
Spiritual maintenance is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to
Hmm.
put it.
Hmm. And I suppose people would say, well, regular prayer, if
Sure,
you're
absolutely.
an
Yeah.
adherent of the Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah, see, this is the thing that how do I put this? Like, they, to my shallow understanding of Islam, it looks as if they have a highly advanced kind of ritual practice of their religion, which is this, the how many prayers a day, uh, the extreme. I don't want to say extreme, but the asceticism of, you know, this and that and the other thing. It If you did these things genuinely, I think that that's probably a spiritual technology to connect to the divine. And I would suspect that there's a lot of Muslims who have, like, really deep spiritual practice. But again, as far as I'm concerned, Islam is an invader ideology. And if I would love it if these so-called spiritual Muslims could tell the evil Muslims to, like, leave the rest of us alone, and just go. If your religion is true, then you wouldn't need to enforce it on other people. If your God tells you that you can kill people outside your religion, then your God is the devil.
Well,
And
the verse doesn't actually say kill non-Muslims just because they're non-Muslims. I think the verse that you're thinking of says, in the context of a battle, here are the Muslims, here are the non-Muslims, they're at war, and so they fight. So I don't think that, I mean, there isn't a general commandment for Muslims to kill
yeah.
non-Muslims, other than in the context of a battle. Um,
So. So this brings up the question of how. I mean, I'm not a scholar. I know very little about it, but I've seen lots and hours of scholars of Islam who do go into these texts and point out case after case after case of, here's how they use religion as a, a warring ideology.
Hmm?
And I can't comment on those
But
things.
would you ever read the Quran just to check for yourself if it's as evil as you might think
No,
it is?
no. I don't. I apologize. That sounds ignorant for me to say that, and I don't mean to be so bullish about it. But I feel as if that, to me, the Abrahamic religions are too corrupt with too much history and politics and so many other things that you. It's such a
But it's a source of Western greatness.
well. I think I feel that our DNA is the source of our Western greatness. That if, by accident in history, let's say, Constantine did not choose to become Christian on his deathbed, and who knows what the circumstances of that were, that if, say, the Roman Empire continued to have, Apolloism or,
But they
or,
had
or,
it.
or
They gave it up. That was what Constantine was giving up. I mean, there was the Greek pantheon, which later became the Roman pantheon, and it was falling apart, which is why um, Constantine said, "Well, we have to have a new religion, and it looks like it has to be Christianity because, that's the up and coming one. So I better, use it for the Roman state religion before it
yeah.
overwhelms us, because
So, I mean,
what that was what he did. He basically called all the bishops and say, well, and said to them, you better come up with a doctrine I
okay,
can use, and
okay.
then it will be used.
Was that a political decision or a spiritual decision?
I think it was pretty political. I mean, it can be presented as spiritual,
Yeah,
which I'm
yeah.
sure it must be presented, for to get the believers. But I think you should watch a documentary called Caesar's Messiah, which
Okay.
has the theory that the whole a Christian doctrine was basically cooked up by the Roman propaganda department, and was a revenge on Jews for causing the Romans so much trouble when they were rebelling
Hmm.
against the Romans.
I would, if you could please send me the link, I would be extremely grateful for that.
Yes, and we could talk about it next time.
That would be fabulous. I love talking to you. I really just have a great affection for you. And it doesn't matter that I agree or don't agree
No, it doesn't
with what you
matter at
say.
all.
I'm
Uh-huh.
excited about, there's so few people trying to talk about these things, and that's why I give you such great credit, because I feel like you and I are kind of like mirror opposites. And
I know. It's like, what do you see in Eastern religions? What do you see in the
it's
Abrahamic
I
faith?
mean,
You're crazy.
it's funny, it's weird, it's wonderful, and I wonder, I think our children would be very confused, though. I don't know.
Well, I
But,
think that there are, bits and pieces of truth in all religions. We just have to choose the best one. That's all we have to do.
well,
And they think,
that's
but
see,
what is the best one? How do we know it's the best one?
yeah,
And
I
blah, blah,
know.
blah.
Yeah, this is I find an exciting question. I mean, I know it's complex, but for me at, age 18, facing, like, I mean, I was borderline suicidal because I was so terrified of the prospect of going ahead in my life, and I lost everything. The beautiful Eden of, I mean, I literally had, like, my life was like Eden. It was this beautiful time, and I was cast out, and
Mhm.
then, I had to face this. So I just needed freaking answers now. I need a path, a structure, a method now. I don't want to spend years trying to figure out and interpret the scriptures and what's the historic this and political that. And no, I need a vehicle to get out of the storm. And it was, all the answers are just laid out so easily. They're really indisputable. And then, because they're based on natural law, they're based on the science of the mind and psychology and blah, 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 all these things. Basic morality is morality anywhere you go. Gravity is gravity anywhere you go.
Mhm.
We don't, in a sense, we don't need a book and a religion to tell us what's right and wrong. We're not stupid children.
Don't we?
I, I, I mean, perhaps the masses do. Perhaps the masses are not smart enough to attain higher levels. That's a mean spirited thing to say. And I'm not saying that in a mean spirit. I'm just saying that unfortunately, maybe people's IQ aren't high enough, or they don't have the karma, or they don't have the inspiration to say, what's going on here? Like it's more like my football team versus your football team. And that to me it's pathetic. I find that stupid and annoying, to think of
Mm-hmm.
religion from that perspective. So now that I've attained like wisdom and comfort and calm and all these things, I can now turn back and revisit the Abrahamic religions. And right now I'm very interested in Gnosticism, and I'm just investigating these things. I don't claim to be these things. Franz Barden's Hermetics, initiation into Hermetics, is fascinating to me.
What
It's
is
going to
that
take,
about?
in a word, in the okay. I don't want to. I'm not good enough at this thing to be able to explain it yet, so I think it would be unfair to give people the wrong idea.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, it would be uh, Hermes Trismegistus, Atlantis, magic, manifestation, quantum physics, occult, not in the demonic sense, by the way. All these things, there are in. I'm not interested in calling upon spirits that I don't know to help me, to give me things in life. That to me is too dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, prayer is magic in a sense. Prayer is just Christian occult. Okay, when you think about it, you're praying to a deity to give you something or do something.
Mm-hmm.
That's what magic is. It's manifesting things in this world, this three-dimensional reality, from another reality. Okay, so so I'm just trying to break through the linguistic problems here, and because there's so much bias associated with words and terms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an occultist. I hate Satanism. I hate evil. I hate black magic. I hate all of that. I'm not, and I've seen it, and I know people that have been affected by it. Partially through I used to advise the local Native American government on educational topics. I was like an educational consultant,
Mm-hmm.
and getting to know the people in the Native American culture. I learned about their black magic and things like that, and how
Well, so you
real
get
it is.
traumatized people who've been victims of black
It
magic.
can, it can. Magic is totally real, and the word magic alone sucks because we think of a man pulling a rabbit out of a hat and illusion, but we need a better word for it. Anyway,
Can you, would you, I'd be interested to know if you could describe to us what it is you mean by magic as it has affected Native
okay.
Americans.
Well, you'll in my experience, most indigenous religions have a very, very strong relationship to the spirit world. And not only that, they're able to communicate with the spirits in nature, trees, mountains, animals, wind.
Animism.
Say that again. I didn't hear you.
It's called animism, isn't it?
Animism, correct, correct. It's in Shinto. It's in Taoism. It's in almost every indigenous religion in the
Well,
world.
do you know what? I was talking to, actually a British nationalist, and he's into nature, and one of his descriptions of his experience with nature, it made me think, aha, you are describing the features of animism,
Yes,
because he was talking the birds and the trees and the mountains and the
yes,
lakes, something
yes,
like that, and
yeah.
it is a kind of nature worship, isn't it?
To an extent, yes, and depending on what culture you're talking about,
Mhm.
and then
I
there's
think
the
it's pretty
question.
universal when you think, wow, nature, and I'm in it, I'm part of it, you know, and whatever people think when they, get this transcendent experience when they're in
Right,
nature.
right. when you can set aside the glasses of Western arrogance and look at indigenous religions on their own terms and try to experience those things, then it becomes immediate. That's what I mean about get out of the theory and get into the practice. And so um, their particular case, how do we say this? Okay, so they have shamans. They have there's this thing called false face masks. There are these wooden masks that are created. They're extremely secretive. Um, so I shouldn't be telling people about it because
Mm-hmm.
I might, I could, and I have been like negatively affected by kind of like angry spirits. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just, I have to be careful what I say. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so where do I go with this? Magic is the human interaction with the spirit world. And so, let's say I want to, I want to win the election. So I'm going to, you know, appease my spirits by human sacrifice so that I get elected. That
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that's black magic, right? Where you're using it
You're
for
doing something
harmful.
immoral too.
Yeah. And the spirit world is filled with just as many bad people, quote people, if you will, as the human world. So there's not a lot. There's just a veil in between us and them. So, and the problem is a lot of these spirits, they kind of they put thoughts in our mind that are meant to trigger us into negative. They kind of feed off of these energies because everything really is energy. We can't perceive that directly through the 3D life that we live, our
Mm-hmm.
body, our senses. But when you practice things like meditation, qigong, yoga, kundalini, you're going to start experiencing these things and you're going to unlock these natural psychic abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that is essentially the crisis of Earth. Earth is a kind of a prison planet where we're not meant to know these things. These things are hidden from us. That, Christianity is in this sense. I don't know if this is true, but I'll just propose the concept that perhaps Christianity as we know it today is a diversion away from these spiritual practices, so that instead God is separate from us and that we must, you know, obey the laws and blah, 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 and then we get to heaven kind of thing. Whereas heaven is, what do they call it? The kingdom of heaven on earth. It's around us all the time. And the second coming is the Christ awakening within our own spirits. And that's essentially Buddhism. So I know I'm going all over the map, and some of these concepts might be confusing to the
Mm-hmm.
listeners. I don't know. But am I answering your question?
Well, I keep thinking of the evil eye when you talk about these, bad things happen to you if you do, certain stuff. But um, I've been told by a rabbi that the evil eye is not, it's not actually superstitious. It's a kind of psychological cause and effect. Because
Well,
it is
what's
defined as the evil eye of envy when one person looks upon another with the presumption that you hate the person you envy for having the thing that
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
want.
yeah. Well, I think what I want to say here is that we have to get past materialism, and by materialism I mean spiritual materialism, meaning that we attach to our own desires, therefore we have envy, and then through envy we suffer and we make bad choices, we do things that create bad karma, and then that bad karma spawns more bad karma, and all of it is just living in the material world rather than the spiritual world. If this is what I think true religion should aspire to, is to transform the human into someone who moves past or transcends the material world. And therefore, if you see something that you want, if it's, you know, love or money or whatever, power, all these things, then you can see it by its true nature and have a healthy interaction with it. It's not bad to want love and money and power. That's not innately bad. It's our suffering for it and the way we use it to hurt other people that's bad. You see what I'm saying? So go ahead.
Oh, I suppose I was going to say that one of my okay, it's part of my theory that not only do people compete with each other for resources and material goods, they also compete with each other for status. And
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
categorize this desire as a spiritual desire. You might say this is not particularly spiritual, but there is this sense of it's not fair that, so and so should have all these things and I do not.
Sure, sure, sure. That's materialism, and that's the opposite of spirituality. You have everything you need. If you're to really follow Jesus's teachings, then you can manifest, loaves and fishes. What need is there for desire? What need is there for power to take from others and control others when you can just manifest the things you need? You get where I'm going with this?
Yes, yes, and
Yeah.
also for those who believe in the Abrahamic God, there is the virtue of humility that we accept what we are given by God with gratitude, even though there might be other stuff that we want. We accept that perhaps
Well,
we will, I don't know, never get married, never be beautiful, never be,
yeah, 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 yeah.
God
Here's
knows.
here's the Buddhist answer to that is essentially that, you know, you're even God can't. That's I don't know how to phrase this. You create your own karma, and through karma, you're born beautiful or ugly. You're born rich or poor. You're born black or white. You're born Jew or Gentile. You're born into the karma that you created, and that is the law of nature. That is the cosmic law. So to say to God, oh, I want these things, when God's saying just use natural law. If you want to grow corn, plant it in the ground and water it and let it grow. If you want to grow poison, plant it in the ground, water it, and let it grow. You know where I'm going with this? So it's kind of like about right understanding, and right understanding and right belief is sort of one of the laws of Buddhism as well. So it again, it breaks that
Right
idea
thought,
of,
right speech,
yes,
right action.
excellent, excellent. You know about those. So these are the tenets of Buddhism, and I don't know. I feel like, I mean, God is always loving and giving, but the question is, what are we asking for? If my son wants candy, and every day, every day, every day, oh, okay, am I being a loving father by giving him candy for lunch, breakfast, and dinner? You see where I'm going?
Yeah,
We
you
have
have to be the wise parent to not give him everything he wants because he doesn't know that the thing he wants is bad for him.
So we're talking about desire and materialism and versus spirituality and God. And so this is kind of the thing where I guess I'm trying to figure this conversation out here, is whereas it seems to me in the Abrahamic religions, there's a sort of, be happy with what you got and don't complain. Whereas Jesus comes along and says, oh, check those water jars. There's plenty of wine. Don't worry about it. Like, this is a totally different
Hmm.
message there.
I mean,
The
okay,
Old Testament.
I would interpret it as this that God has given us laws, and within the parameters of obeying these laws, we're allowed to do whatever it is we want to do, provided we don't break those laws. And
Well,
that's the simplest way of putting it.
okay,
And
but
and
you have to.
obviously, our society should reflect um, our moral system in our laws. So our legal system should reflect our moral system, and Sharia is this understanding and this assumption of the logic of this.
I see. I guess what I'm saying is we're approaching it from different angles. So, and they're both legitimate in their own right. So, laws, morality, government, society, structure, fine. But what good is a society if the individuals are materialist children? You see, if we as people have to change ourselves deep down and truly inside and do the hard work to become the Ubermensch, to become who we are, to become the great men of the West that we claim to be and that our ancestors maybe were. So that is the answer. All the laws and systems in society will sprout out of that and will form naturally out of that. You see, just as a structure to maintain this spiritual level, of like adulthood, spiritual adulthood, if you will. So that's my message. I mean, the American Zarathustra as a brand on my website and my YouTube channel is implying that, the Friedrich Nietzsche sense of the myth of Zarathustra, not the Zoroastrian Zarathustra, which I have no problem with. But that was my initial intention, to say, like, let us create a new Western man for the modern, postmodern era that is enlightened and etc. So
Could you explain the role and purpose of Zarathustra in Nietzsche's book?
I don't have I guess, the academic authority to do that. I feel that there's enough information out there that we're people who are far greater at articulating this than I am. I would say my attraction to it is, that's kind of a funny story behind it, but there there are parallels between the life of the Buddha and the fictional story of Zarathustra by Nietzsche. So that's something that really, like, wow, like ping, that really hit me in a way. Like, this is fascinating. Here's a man who transcends society, you know, goes on a journey, has his students, and uh, has some form of enlightenment.
Was it
Um,
The Zarathustra who said God is dead and we have killed him?
it's
Was
that
he the
is one of
character who said that?
um I'm gonna first, to me, like, that's topical. I want to talk about the meaning of it, and in the sense of, like, what, that's such a dangerous thing to say, in many ways, right? I take it to mean we ruined Christianity. We ruined our spirituality. We cut off our connection to God through modernism, industrial revolution, uh, probably many other things. And I'm not an expert on Nietzsche. I'm not going to pretend to be. Again, that's what books are for. That's what I'm just trying to translate what I know and experience into what I'm doing with my media, rather than be a factoid professor. Oh, he said this, and on page 25 he said that. I don't care about factoids. I want to know what is the meaning and the purpose, and let's take that route. So, because again, that's a kind of materialism. So, and it's not that we don't need that. We need the facts, but and I'm sorry if I'm being annoying. I'm just trying to get to the
No,
heart of
no, no,
things.
that's okay. We can concentrate on what you actually want to say.
Hmm. What is it that I want? No, well, I'm following your questioning strategy. So, um, methods. I don't. Did you want to? Maybe, I don't know.
You were talking about Zara, why you call yourself American Zarathustra.
Well, I'm not. I mean, I'm not. That's a brand name for my website and my. I. I tried to create like a superhero character for one of my web comics with this name, and then, years ago, I okay, the Ubermensch, the Overman, the Superman. I'm a comic book illustrator, and the concept of Superman, when I discovered, like, whoa, wait a minute, there's a deeper origin in philosophy for this name. Where did the term Superman originate? And then suddenly I discovered Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche. I remember in college, I wrote quotes on a Superman poster and hung that up in my dorm. Thought, like, I was like the only one that thought it was cool.
Mhm.
But, that was kind of my, you know, college kid way of identifying and segueing into that world. Um, but for me, it's sort of a dog whistle to the alt right or to the dissident right or to white nationalists, Germanic indigenists, if you will,
Mhm.
that we have to dig down into our DNA and our Western biospirit and pull up our own Western Buddha. We have to become a Western Buddha. And how do we do that? Because this comes back to your question of what is the right religion for the West. I think that this is obviously a major theme for you. So I'm not, I know. nobody in the in the distant right or white positive sphere wants to hear about Buddhism. They cannot see past, like, oh, that's Asian. It's indigenously Asian, and it's not. Just for starters, the Buddha's family origins are from Iran. He was Proto-European, and I mean he was Aryan.
Indo-Aryan even.
He was Aryan. He was Aryan, and so the question, there's a lot of questions around that. Even in Buddhism and Buddhist text, he's called the great Arya, and Arya is just a variation of Aryan. So, yeah, for our Aryan nationalists out there, latch onto that, and then take your journey inward to these things. And like I said, gravity affects us all. If you are trying to create Apolloism or a new Christianity or some kind of philosophy, religions, political system that is going to save the West, it cannot happen unless it's based on natural law. You can't defy gravity. You have to work with it. You work with the physics of spirituality.
Okay, so when you say natural law, you mean logic, do you?
Absolutely, logic is clearly part of that, but logic is you know I mean, it's like science, right? Science is you have to be able to practice that test over and over and over, and you'll always get the same result. That's logic, right? That's science. We can use science. I mean, there's a really wonderful dialogue between scientists and Tibetan Buddhists. There's all kinds of cool resources online for people who, I'd say, if you're a Western materialist, which a lot of people on the right wing are, then that would be a good segue into investigating Eastern thought. So please don't get distracted by the robes and the paintings and the sculptures and the music and the beautiful women and get away
And
from
the
that.
fun times.
Yeah, and the great food. No, anyway, and get into what is this really about. So apply science to the science of the mind. What is the mind? So Tibetan Buddhists are essentially like astronauts of the mind, of inner space. And so there's all kinds of great resources for materialists to understand that. And because, I don't know, people are picky. We all have our different ways. Pure Land Buddhism that relies on chanting as the means towards enlightenment is one of the most powerful and effective and popular ways in Asia as far as a Buddhist practice. It works so easily, and because the mind and language are like, how do I say it? It's like air inside a tire of a wheel. They go hand in hand. They work together. One and the other. One creates the other, per se. So language is a part of meaning. Meaning creates reality and in our minds. And so when you chant, or you could chant, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, or praise the Lord, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. You can use that linguistic psychological technology to transform yourself and be closer to the divine, or be more aware that you are already divine. Does that make sense? Because you're shutting down the parts of your mind that are creating and living in an illusion. You're awakening a Cartesian psychology where you see yourself as the consciousness sitting in the movie theater of your life. And so there's just enough space there where you don't have to be affected by the drama, and you see karma for what it is, and you recognize that I can make choices that are spiritually based, and and that could be based in Christianity or else or otherwise. So you can take the technology of Buddhism and graft it onto Christianity. I know that sounds insane, but some people actually do that. So anyway, these are just topics.
Yes, yes. I think maybe prayer is really an act of humility and submission, and maybe it's not that complicated, really, if
Yeah,
we understand what it is. I mean, we,
sure.
we can pray I mean, there are most prayers are about asking for something, but
Mm.
there can also be prayers of thanks when you get the thing you want.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
which
guess
is
we just need
magic.
to write our thank you letters to
Yeah, and
get.
I would. I'm sorry, I cut you
That's
off.
all, really. I think, about sometimes we're not even grateful when we get the things that we do get.
That's the see. That's the point of it, is that you have to attain spiritual maturity. So you know, I mean, I'll criticize myself. There's times when I would ask God for something and I would get it like almost immediately. And then just right after that, I would go right back to my negative thinking and, desires and all my crappy low level mentality behaviors. And
Yeah,
then
but
think
yeah,
like,
and another thing, and another thing. Usually, I mean, because you think, oh well, I got this, maybe I'll get that if I ask,
mhm,
for the next thing.
yeah.
And um, I think, well, if we don't get our prayers answered immediately, we are more grateful when we eventually do get it. So
Well,
so
certainly.
even
Yeah.
the withholding of the gift makes it more precious.
Well, the point I'm trying to illustrate is that it's not the gift we get, it's how we receive it. Meaning, if you can receive your prayers answered by God and then become more spiritual as a result of it because it confirms your relationship with God, or you can just be like a selfish brat and go right about your selfish brat life, and continue
Hmm.
doing
Hmm.
mean things and stupid things. So that's what I'm trying to point at, is that we have to grow and we have to take
Hmm.
responsibility for our inner world. We have to
Hmm.
understand the mind, understand karma, understand the nature of reality, uh, spiritualism to an extent, multiple dimensions, afterlife. And then once all this falls into place and locks into place, you mature in a way
Hmm.
that you couldn't even imagine. You couldn't even see yourself being the person that you can become.
I don't know if you're aware that. I mean, it surprised me when I first heard of it, but Jews are supposed to thank God for their misfortune.
That's an interesting. I think that one could take that general idea and apply it to any religion and anybody, whereby, you know, the misfortune puts you in the circumstances that you have to work through to get stronger and better, right?
Mm.
I mean, so I mean, granted,
Yeah,
some
yeah. So,
religion.
we instantly know, well, but it just sounds a bit extreme. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
am I supposed to thank God if I come home, you know,
And the
and
house
it's
is
all
on fire.
gone
I know,
with
right?
everything
There's a
I love,
well,
Ah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, here's an interesting thought. There's not just individual karma. There's national karma. There's ethnic karma. Nations have karma, and Buddhists believe. I could never confirm this, but they believe that natural disasters are created by national karma. So earthquakes,
Yeah, they're
floods.
called acts of God in insurance anyway.
I'm not that deep to know the truth on that topic, but
Yeah. No, no, I
I
mean
find
sort of
it.
legally for insurance purposes that they're called, you're not insured for acts of God, that kind of thing. So we're not paying
Well,
out. Even though
it's a
your flight was cancelled or whatever, your ship sank, I don't know.
yeah, geez. Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, but that ties right back to the beginning of our discussion, where like, God, why did you let my father die? That was my mentality, and that was my split
Hmm.
from the church. I didn't want to. I loved the church. I loved being Catholic. I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to be like exiled from the Garden of Eden and have all my friends and family think like, "What are you doing? What's happening? What's wrong with you?" This wasn't a fun thing to do. I wasn't trying to, look at me, I'm cool, I'm Buddhist, I'm better than you. Like that. Buddhism was not popular among liberals when I got into it. You
Hmm.
see what I'm saying? There was no, nowadays, you see people with like the Buddhist prayer beads, the mala beads, and you say, "Oh, what's that for?" I don't know. I just bought it in the store.
Mhm.
It's like that drives me out of my mind. Like
Mhm.
how it's so commercialized.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, it's interesting though that tragedies they can kill you or make you stronger. I guess.
Yeah.
So, and I think that the American Zarathustra would run into these tragedies and transform them into paradise.
Or,
That's
or, or, or learn from them and make
at
himself
at
stronger.
least, yeah, at very least. So, this is a very fresh approach to the crisis of the West right now, is to think through like you know, there's a lot of talk about, well, how do we defeat the left? How do we stop communism? How do we blah 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 blah? And there's just talking about these things in public can get you in serious trouble depending on what country you live in, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
And the more that our backs are pushed up against the wall and we have less choices of how to react, the more likely violence will be the end result on a very, very profound, tragic level.
Hmm.
And we on the right don't want that. We're civilized, you know, kindness is killing us. We want order, we want, blah blah blah. But at the same time, we're the ones that kind of let this happen. We have to blame
No, no,
ourselves.
it's not the right, it's the men. The men let it happen.
Hmm. Well,
I,
I
I mean,
mean,
I'm not even going to blame any particular race or class. And it's like, why did it happen? Because people were too, uh, and well, they were enjoying the culture of sex and drugs and rock and roll.
mhm.
That was several generations. Okay, that was about 2 generations ago,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe. But
It's
but
not a lot of time to like destroy a freaking civilization, though. I mean,
you
think
just
about
get
it.
one generation not getting it, and the next
Yeah,
generation not getting it even
it's
more,
you nailed
etc.,
it.
etc.
You nailed it. Yeah, and I think our audience generally knows about the Frankfurt School being a Jewish, how do we put this, rules for radicals, Saul Alinsky, creating infiltrating all the institutions of the West, family, uh, sexual relationships,
Perhaps, but
religion, institutions, etc., government, and then rotting them out from the inside, because you can't destroy America militarily, etc. You have to go into the family,
the
into the
march through
media.
the institutions. But
Right.
again, this is the kind of wrong think that you will let go on under your noses if you don't know what your moral principles are. If you
You,
don't know what your rules are,
I,
you don't know they're being broken.
you are shining right now. This is such a beaming point that is so critical, and that plays directly into what I'm talking about: spiritual maturity. Like, how can you get spiritual maturity without knowing what your principles are? So, like, I know lots of Christians that I are very spiritually evolved, wonderful, intelligent people, mature people, and you know I don't know. They don't get a TV show. They don't get. They're not mainstreamed or whatever. But they're in a sense more humble. But they're evolved people, and so I can't. That's why I can't really comment
Because
on
it's discouraged,
Christianity.
probably. If you have principles, you'd be labeled as an fundamentalist, an extremist,
Well,
a
I
deplorable.
in a way that a system is only as good as the people who do that system. Like I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how better to say that, but like, if we as people don't have this kind of clear moral standards, clear understanding of who we are as Westerners, how can we navigate the world, which is a power grab, which is a cruel political world, a world of, you know, war and fighting over resources and racial problems and blah blah blah. So that's my message essentially, is to try to strive forward. Again,
We'll
I'm
try
not
to
a
understand the causes. I think because I think, okay, you may think I'm being far too simplistic, but if you haven't got a moral system that you actually follow, then you have no moral principles. Then you won't know they're being broken, and you won't defend them because you don't know that you're supposed to be
Yeah,
defending them.
it's agree. That's clearly agreeable. I think that's very logical. I think the question becomes, what's the relationship between morality and cosmology? So the Christian understanding of the cosmos and our relationship and purpose in it is very different from the Eastern conception of our relation to the cosmos. And
I don't quite understand. I mean, because the Western system is so based on the rule of law, Ten Commandments, that the yes no, laws that you're supposed to follow.
mhm,
In the East, it's more fluid, I think, and I think there are certain religions that encourage you to, well, just be spiritual and don't think about things too much and shut up. And civilizations who've gone that way have fallen in the same way that China fell, because what what the imperial government of China was just saying, just shut up. You can do whatever you want with your
mhm,
religion,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you just obey the law, and the laws
yeah,
are unfair, and this created resentment and misgovernment and
hmm, hmm,
weakness and invasion and revolution, etc. And the same thing is happening now in the West. And of course, at the time, China was thinking, we were so great. We're this ancient
hmm,
empire. We
yeah,
know everything. We're
yeah.
not listening to anyone.
Chinese supremacy.
At the time, yeah, because I mean, China thought it
Oh,
was the center. I mean, the
it's
Middle Kingdom is the most
yeah,
um, um,
yeah,
Sino-centric
yes. Oh my God,
nation
yes,
you could
yeah,
possibly think of.
yeah. And it's still very alive today, believe me.
Well,
But the
only because it of its population, and it's losing it
you
because
know
it's one child policy, and then suddenly all these Chinese couples
yeah
saying, well, we don't want more than one kid, we can't afford
the
it, we
right
haven't got the energy, blah blah. and
yeah
and it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, once you get middle class, you'll be thinking, oh, but universities, oh, piano lessons, trips to wherever. We don't want.
yeah yeah. I think Jewish supremacy is the only relevant problem of the world right now. I think China has a lot to be proud of in terms of its civilization, its accomplishments, art, culture, these things. Um, we're all human, in the end. It's they've only ever wanted hegemony over their region. But granted, I don't know, we're kind of going off into a topic on Chinese history, which I'm fascinated with. But I don't know, I'm more focused on
On Jewish supremacy.
yeah,
Well,
that's
I,
the
I
real
think
problem.
Jewish supremacy can be explained by the fact that they have been worshipping the most powerful God conceivable for longest.
That's a You're really striking a very intense nerve right there with that statement. Not just for me, but for people in general. It's just a really pivotal question. In the one hand, I know people that would argue that Yahweh is a desert god who is a small g god, and that the Jews in their tragedies throughout history in that region uh, somehow had this relationship with Yahweh, who then gave them whatever resources they needed and got them around to do whatever they do. So I don't know if Yahweh is God capital G, or is a small G God. I'm not clear on
Oh,
that,
but
honestly.
the Abrahamic God is the Jewish God as well as the Muslim God, because it's the same God that they worship. And the narrative is that God first revealed the Torah for Jews and then the Quran for Gentiles.
So okay, but how do
I
we
mean,
know
that's how I understand
Right,
it.
right. No, no, no. I guess I mean, this in a sense is academic, but how do we know that this is a small g God or the ultimate God? Like God, capital G God. How do we know that?
We choose to believe it. I mean,
I see.
obviously, the Jews choose to believe that this is our God. It's the most powerful God. There's no point worshiping any other
You know,
God. And Muslims kind of.
here's where I'm going with that. A culture that has made its entire survival about lying their way into parasiting off of other cultures. It doesn't have my trust to make me believe that. You see, like, and if they could show that through some kind of demonstration, through some kind of technology, spiritual technology, where you feel that truth and you know it by experience, then I'd be more, friendly to the thought of it.
I don't quite understand what you want them to do.
No, I'm just saying, like, how do we know that the Abrahamic God is not one of the gods that exist? That is a small g God. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, what's the difference between God as we know it, which I would call the ground of being, the sum of all consciousness, versus Zeus and Shiva and Yahweh? You see where I'm going with this?
Well, I suppose you can say more people believe in the Abrahamic God than any other God, so that must make him, if you want to go by
Sure.
the opinion of
Okay.
the
Okay.
majority of people in the world,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can say, well, these Jews, Christians, and Muslims, they all believe in the Abrahamic God. Therefore, there is a significant majority of humanity who
This
believe
is
in that.
fascinating.
Actually, I'm not quite sure about
How
the actual numbers.
Right. What this means to me from my knowledge base is that when so many people believe in something, they manifest that thing. And that's a kind of a karma that we talked about, national and ethnic karma. So it's not unreal. But defining it is pretty hard to do because bias, I mean, and this comes back to the whole, if you insult my prophet or my God, I have to kill you. Or, if you don't believe in my Jesus, then you burn at the stake. Or, like, those things are really, negative.
Well, actually, I suppose to be fair to all religions, I mean, we have to say that, there's nothing in the New Testament that says you have to burn anybody at the stake who doesn't
Sure,
believe
sure,
that
sure,
Jesus is
sure.
God. It's like Christians thought that that was the only way they
Hmm.
could do it. And
Yeah,
but then Christians are they don't have the best scripture because the New Testament doesn't have all these rules, and indeed Christians don't even claim that the New Testament was written by Jesus, let alone God. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jews,
Whereas
Jews and Muslims say, well, our scripture does come from God and it does contain His law, so we're going to follow it.
well, again, the Gospel of Thomas are all sayings of Jesus, and I urge people, Christians especially, to go read it and learn about it. It's difficult to translate the meaning of all the sayings, but as you grow in your understanding of natural law, then it makes more and more sense. But what I think you and I are talking about now is, again, the difference between the system, the religion, and the people practicing it. So, unfortunately or fortunately, I judge a religion by the people that practice it, and I know that's not fair, really, in a way, because you have to look at the books, the reading, the spiritual technology of said religion. But when the people don't seem to exemplify it, then it brings some doubt. Like, if I don't know, let's say I go to France, and more French are rude to me than polite to me. I'm going to leave there kind of thinking, man, the French are kind of rude. I'm not saying the French are rude. I'm not saying that,
No,
but
you're
I'm
not saying not all of them are rude, but the thing is, it's useful to have something in practice and in theory. So it's like, yeah, you have this recipe, but hey, you didn't follow it, therefore
right,
the dish is
right,
crap.
right.
Or,
And that's
there are these assembly instructions, you didn't follow it, and that's why your
so
table
we
is missing a leg or something.
we we keep reiterating the point that I'm making, which is, it's not so much the message, but the man. It's about the kind of spiritual maturity of the person and how well they practice the religion. So when I worked for the Muslim school, I will tell you, and this contradicts what I say and feel, but I met some of the most spiritual people that I've ever met. I was very impressed at how spiritually evolved these particular Muslims were. There's a gentleman from Egypt who wanted to invite me to his home, meet his family, and he wanted to learn about Buddhism. And he, I met there was another woman from Jordan who, she spoke French, and she didn't wear the hijab, and we had fantastic conversations. She was able to be Muslim and criticize Islam at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, Talking about Christians and Muslims living peacefully together, which would be wonderful. Um, like those people don't make the news. They don't make the mainstream understanding of Islam. And I still don't want them in my country. That I don't believe Islam has any place at all in the Western countries at all. It's antithetical, in my opinion, to Westernism, and I think
But
that's a
what
point
is
that
Westernism?
right. It's based on our who we are as a people, as a race. I think that there's this tendency to not want to look at the reality of our DNA and our behavior. People are generally a combination of DNA and culture and the
Well, you could say
circumstances.
Westerners are imperialistic and warlike,
Well, maybe yes. I mean, there's a case for that.
and
But
cosmopolitan and
but
multicultural.
Arabs are that way. Chinese are that way. I mean, how can you say that's exclusively our DNA? It's just it's part of human reality. Now, granted, I would say that we're explorers, we are inventors, and warring and in colonization and these things, that's kind of part of that. It's woven together. But China has got, I mean, what's Taiwan? What is Singapore? You could even say that, like, you know, China is actually many different countries that are all under one sword. So there's all kinds of colonization that they've done.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
China is an empire.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, you know, I'm not, I don't know, I want to look at that term with neutrality. I'm not trying to judge it morally, but yes, but I would say more in the sense that we're explorers and inventors. So there's a highly, highly creative gene in the Western man that, that's not to say other people don't have creativity, but there's something quite unique about us, and it
Mhm.
needs to be, rethought and protected.
And
So
you think Islam would make Western man less creative?
it would stifle us terribly. It wouldn't work with us. It's oil and water. I don't think it works.
But I don't understand what particular thing about it that would make you think it would stop Westerners
Well,
from being quite so creative and inventive.
starting off with the fact that you know way more about Islam than I do, I'm not in a position to you know give a lot of examples other than what anybody can just perceive, clearly see. The kind of what's the I want to call it asceticism, the sort of like, you know severe moral rules that they impose on themselves is in some regard limiting. I don't
Can you
think that
think
it's
of a severe moral rule that they impose on themselves?
well. Look at the way women are. What are the status and behavior and position of women in
But once
Muslim
upon a
societies?
time, Western women couldn't even own property
I think there's definitely a great
and didn't
debate
have the
in here.
vote.
Yeah, there's a great debate in here. Um, and it's not really one that I feel I can engage in. I don't have the background you have on Islam. But I guess where I'm going with this is I feel that it's stifling. I don't think that I feel like it's a foreign religion. I feel like Christianity is a foreign religion too. I think
But
that it would be.
Buddhism is a
I know.
foreign
Well, but
religion.
is it? Is it? Buddha was Aryan. You see where I'm going with that? Nobody sees that because all we can see is, Chinese restaurants, and karate movies, something like that. So it's a shallow perspective. We see it through layers and layers and layers of Asian culture because it traveled that way. Now, Buddhism, I think you recall, in Afghanistan, they had these giant Buddhist sculptures carved into the mountains, and the Muslims dynamited those and destroyed them. There's the Gupta period in Buddhism in India. You can see Greco-Roman sculptures of the Buddha. So, they had, there was Buddhism could have gone the other way. It could have traveled across Persia and into Eastern Europe and beyond. But it would have done it without the sword. It would have done it based on the merits of what it is. So Westerners, meritocracy, logic, I think it would have rooted very naturally. Um, these are highly speculative things to say. I
Hmm.
mean, like I'm not going to stand life and death on this. These are just speculations.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, the Abrahamic faiths do come from a particular country in the Middle East, and you think, well, is that an Eastern religion or is it not? And then
Yeah,
we could
yeah,
probably talk for ages about what
yeah,
kind.
yeah, yeah.
But it's I suppose these are okay.
That's
But obviously, for the God of Israel is also the God of the universe. I mean, that I think that is, I think to be grasped. So. I guess the God of Israel is supposed to, has to kickstart the idea somehow. He has to start the process somewhere. It happens to be Israel, and the Jews, and then Christianity had a global empire, and and now what kind of thing? Well, three global empires have been Christian,
hmm
which is quite interesting.
very much. So for me, when I look at these kinds of discussions, I see different kind of topics. One is like minutia about dates and debates and things. I don't go there. I certainly can look at, like, say, you just stated some facts. These are critical, relevant things, and then there's the spiritual stuff, which is really what I'm interested in. So
Mhm.
do you see that? That's the spectrum of, like, useful to useless stuff, that whenever I engage in these conversations, I try to veer away from the minutia, and I only want to talk about historic things as it relates to how can we fix and save Western civilization. So,
By understanding how religions work and fail to work over
hmm
time and
yeah,
what
yeah.
causes them to break down, I guess.
Hmm.
And
Well,
this may need some examination of history.
yeah, and that's what I'm bringing to the conversation, is that it's not so much the system itself, but how well people practice a system. And so for me, a system that doesn't lay out clearly a spiritual technology is not a system that works very well, and could likely, it either has to be enforced by the sword or it's going to die off. And that, to me, is why I'm attracted to Eastern philosophy rather than the Abrahamic religions.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
that breaks my heart to say that. It breaks my heart to say that, because I'm a cultural Christian. My family's Christian. My community's Christian. I see the relevance of Christianity to Western civilization. I celebrate the beauty of it and its arts, and I don't have any kind of hatred towards Christianity. I just, it's like a girl that I was in love with and she broke up with me, and I'm, you know, terribly brokenhearted about that.
mhm.
That's the best way I think I can put it.
Huh. Well, perhaps you'll find another one better. And you,
um, well, it's funny. This side note. I'm actually, part of my practice of Buddhism has allowed me to remove the burning coal inside my belly that makes me like, oh, I have to have a relationship. That people go into relationships just to not be lonely, and that there's a lot of bad. I'm guilty of these things. I've had a very devastating divorce, and I'm still recuperating from that. And Buddhism got me through that as well. But like, there you go. Like, love, desire, pain,
mhm.
trauma, these things, they can damage generations, of
Well, gender
family. Yeah.
relations remains something that is much on the mind of both men and women. I guess men call it something else, but women in universities call it gender relations. But and I guess men would
Right.
call it patriarchy or something else. But
It's
it is fundamentally about that, how happy we are, how successful we are, because it
mhm,
depends on our, our ability to form long-term relationships with members of the opposite sex in order to rear offspring
mhm,
and
mhm,
to parent them properly. And if
yeah,
most of us don't manage to do that successfully,
yeah,
then our
yeah.
society will decline and fall, whatever our
Well,
race.
so these are different objectives. Okay, to save Western civilization, we must have eugenics of some kind. We must have
Marriage
moral.
is eugenic. The
Yeah,
practice of
obviously,
marriage
obviously.
is eugenic.
Well, obviously, all these things are clear, right? So Buddhism is not eugenic. Buddhism is not about uh, like civilization building. It's on a whole other plane, a spiritual plane about ending suffering and saving others in a way that is not like Christian saving. I don't know, another topic I can go into.
Hmm.
But this is where Buddhism is not the answer for saving the West. I won't, I can't state that. I think it is the answer for spiritual maturity, and that, but at the same time, this same spiritual maturity exists in indigenous religions around the world, in that if you know nature's laws, and you can come up with ways to mature. So whatever. So there's a gap there. I'm not. I'm never. I mean, I'm coming on the show simply to talk about my experiences, but I'm
Hmm.
not claiming Buddhism is the answer. That's not what I'm saying. I would love it if people in the West could combine the best of Western civilization and the best of Eastern civilization. We would then be a super civilization, and people who don't know anything about
A
Eastern civilization.
cosmopolitan civilization. But I think really the ability, that this thing that you call maturity, is the ability to understand and apply and
Mhm,
interpret principles in a reasonable and humane way. And once you do that, principles are the way that we assert our identity. If we follow them,
mhm,
obviously, but if you don't follow them, then
yeah.
everything goes to pot. And the the principles that are most effective on our behavior and our beliefs would be religious principles.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
and I think it's because we are overwhelmingly atheists, so we just do what we like. And therefore, without any particular principle, we don't even have the principle of defending the truth, exercising logic,
mhm,
or talking about the principle of a thing, which is an aspect, I think, of morality. Because you follow a principle whether you are punished or rewarded for it. So you
mhm,
do it whether, irrespective of the outcome. And this is the power of the religious principle, that you will refuse to drink alcohol, refuse to eat pork, even though there does not appear to be any prospect of immediate harm. You still won't do it in order to assert your religious identity.
mhm,
And
mhm.
and, and, and
Yeah,
people in this kind of situation are more able to assert and follow principles, in my view.
that's kind of interesting because it just gives me the idea that uh, codifies identity, a national identity, ethnic identity, religious identity into one swirl. Like, this is the thing that's different about Americans and other people around the world. When I say Americans, I guess I mean North Americans, people that are from European colonies, whereby you know our language, ethnicity, religion, and nationality are not all like forged into one thing. We can separate those things. We're German, Italian, French, Hispanic, Black, da 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 da. We have all these kind of a mix of things, and therefore identity is parsed out in different ways. Whereas, I feel that people like the Jews especially are very, all of that is forged into one metal. That is, being Jewish, your ethnic identity, your religion, your political stance, the whole thing. It's crystallized into one thing. And perhaps Muslims are the same, even though there's many. I know that there's different, you know, national ethnicities that practice all of the Abrahamic religions. It's not one color. Although I would say the Jews, in my understanding, are more like, you don't have like a lot of African Jews, I guess. I believe they exist, or Chinese Jews. They do exist, but, it's more of an ethnic thing to my
Mm-hmm.
understanding. So, but let me just finish my point. The question here is identity. And
Mm.
identity is important for saving Western civilization. That's the key here. So, does Buddhism have anything to bring to that? I, at the at this moment in time, I'm going to say no. But on the other hand, it will. How do I say? If we're rooted in reality, in the realities that you know, cosmic realities, the laws of nature, then I don't see how we can go wrong, and it would empower us tremendously. So I'm still working those things out, and I'm finding Hermeticism and Gnosticism is the bridge between Eastern thought and Western Abrahamic traditions. So this is my current project. Probably maybe for the rest of my life, I'll
Mm-hmm.
be under the hood, taking the engine apart, and putting it
Mm-hmm.
back together.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, perhaps next time you can explain a little about your interest in Gnosticism and Hermeticism.
mm, mm. Yeah, if I have something intelligent to say about
Oh, right, it's a work in progress.
very much. I mean, I'm
Uh,
fairly new to it. I have been able to learn manifestation, and I can do manifestation now, which is because, like I said, if you can't prove it, then it's theory. You see, like I urge people who are trying to save Western civilization to find the technology of their thoughts and show it. Science doesn't work unless you show results, measurable results. You have to do the same with, spirituality as well as religion. And these are huge questions that I'm too small to answer, but I'm working on it, and I love joining arms with people who are in the same game like you. You're like, what is the answer? How do we figure this out? And hopefully through time we'll produce some content that will help the next generation to evolve and save Western civilization.
yes, or say how it could have been saved.
uh, I'm not there yet. I mean, I know things are profoundly bad, but it's always darkest before the dawn.
Well, I think
So
we are making progress, and that we are able to talk in a civilized way without actually agreeing with each other on so many things.
well,
So,
you and I are. I mean, that's part of the beauty of this, is that, like, that's another aspect of maturity, is not like attacking people that don't agree with you. I really, I don't know how to say this. I should be more compassionate to people like that, but I have very low respect, or little respect, for people that ad hominem, have to attack other people because they don't agree. I mean, it's black and white. It is or it isn't. It works or it doesn't work. And, you know, everything else is just theory. So,
mm,
anyway, I think I'll stop there on that
yeah,
topic. But I get.
yes, I think it's actually quite useful to work out why people are so intransigent. And if you think about it, it becomes quite clear
It's
about
ego.
why they refuse to accept this obvious
E,
truth, or
e,
come
ego.
to this obvious conclusion, because
Pride.
there's some
Yeah.
psychological,
Well,
you know.
there you go. Your psychology. What is Buddhism? It's the science of it. It's a super science of psychology.
Mhm.
So this is the thing. When you practice Buddhism, you gain, like, basically new eyes through which you can see the transparency of everyone around you. I can read people so well, it's insane, and I can see right through them, because most people are just following an ego script. And that
And
the
you can read their minds.
In a sense, you can predict their moves. You can see how it all works. Even
Yes.
people who are highly sophisticated, far smarter people than me, I can easily, like with like a flick of my finger, I can shatter them because they're ego based. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem with it. Now, I'm not saying the ego is, it's like your arms and your legs. It's a part of your body that you need to survive. I'm not saying don't be egoless in the sense of like some kind of flaccid, you know, we have to be strong. We have to be strong. But at the same time, our egos are this is the same thing that gets us in trouble and confuses us. We're not. See, here's the thing. If how do I say? People go out there and say, oh, "This is my truth," blah blah blah. I'm standing up for this and blah blah blah, and they're not. They're really defending their pride. You see, because if they can't,
Which
if
is
it's
a
just
deadly sin.
yeah, yeah. So I'll give you a great example. I have a really close friend who is, I would call him a biblical scholar. He can he can quote scripture off the top of his head. He's phenomenal, and he's genuinely a good person. He means really well. All that good stuff. Great things to say about him. But his relationship to Christianity is pure ego. It's pure pride. It's the pride of I want to have a flock of people who adore me and follow me and do whatever I say. It's narcissism. You see what I'm saying? But he just uses Christianity as the means to fulfill his narcissism. And Christians and Jews and Muslims all need to take a damn good look in the mirror on that topic and say, am I just being a selfish little jerk? Am I being, is this the
Am I
truth? Am I, is,
weaponizing my
yes,
religion to
yes,
assert status over
you,
others?
yeah. And I mean, if you can unhinge that, you pull that screw out and the whole machine will fall. You see where I'm going with this? Because that's not spirituality. Your pride, your ego, is in many ways your downfall. And it's tricky. You got to have a balance.
Yes,
So
ostentatious displays of humility may be
yeah,
actually ostentatious displays of pride and
in
status.
that's what they call in Buddhism. They'd say you stink of Zen. It's the literally that's the guy that buys the beads and wears them and has a shirt with a Om symbol on it. It's like, and I've many times just randomly I'll meet people and say, "Oh, wow, that's a cool shirt. Yeah, well, what does it mean?" I don't know. And it's like, I should stop asking them. But it's just wearing the robes of real religion and spirituality. It's pathetic.
Mm.
So I don't know. I'm pretty harsh on that topic, and I can't. If I were to tell him this, I could possibly lose my friendship with him. It would unhinge him. He would fall to pieces like a house of
Mhm.
cards. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to lose my friendship with him. We're good friends, blah blah blah. So how do you do that? How do you show someone that you're not worshiping God, you're worshiping your ego? How do you do that? And if you could do that to the Jews, if you could do that to the Muslims, how would that transform them? Because the question isn't always, how do I defeat them, but how do I stop them from harming me? You see, that's a different approach to the war of the West
Yes, and
and
why do they do what they do?
the
And
ego, ego,
well,
pride.
I think a lot of it is confusion and not following their principles, because really I don't think Jews have any business being liberal at all. And
Mm,
if there is a problem with liberalism, then there will be problems with, liberal Jews.
hmm
And
hmm
and rather than attacking Jews for being liberals,
hmm
we should examine whether liberalism is all it's cracked out to be.
Yeah, I agree. Liberalism to me is ego driven, like extraordinarily. I mean, you pull the ego out of liberalism and then it's gone. It's just a balloon with no air. So yeah, this is the benefit of Buddhism and Taoism actually, but Buddhism specifically is that it exposes, the guy behind the curtain that claims to be the Wizard of Oz. And you see it's just some pathetic little weakling who, you know, thinks he's God in his own right, in his own way. So I don't know. I mean, even I don't know. It's a really interesting thing to muse on, and
Yes.
I think it opens up a fabulous new world of perspective on topics. Like if you change your lens through, or your frame through which you see the crisis of the West, the downfall of the West, and you pinpoint it as ego, and then now you've found the problem and you uproot it, and you're going to see change. You'll see real change. But again, like, how do you, it's probably one of the hardest things to do, though, because I see Muslims and the pride, the insane pride that they have about, like, we're superior to you and we're going to take you over, just like we've done with all these other countries throughout all these years, centuries. And the Jews thinking like the Goyim are cattle and we can kill you with impunity and you're just resources and blah, blah, blah. And like, what is that but pride? What is that but ego? The idea that I'm somehow divinely ordained as the owner of the world and everything in it. That's like
Yeah.
ego on steroids. Like, it's absurd.
But I think we should find, representatives of these, Jews and Muslims. So, instead of imposing this view that we have of of the entire group, um, because I think people forget. It's like, I have this view of Jews and whoever. It's like, well, do you even know one that you talk to regularly? And the answer
Hmm.
is usually no. But I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
having
yeah.
this block view of these people I don't like and never want to be friends with.
Right, right.
And it might be, a terrible misunderstanding of,
Sure.
just saying, well, all white people are liberals.
Yes, yes, yes. All white people are Nazis, or so. But I'm not going to go there because I don't know. That's opening a big can of worms right there. But yeah, so this is complex and it slides into minutia. But individuals versus groups it's a whole other thing.
Mm.
Like how that how do we interrelate? Like I mentioned earlier, working at a Muslim school, and I met some of the most spiritual people that were Muslims, and it completely contradicts the things that I believe and say.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
but yet at the same time, if I were to say to them, do you believe America should have Sharia law? I guarantee you they would all say yes.
Yes, of
And
course
at
they'd
that
have to
point,
say yes.
they have to. So, at the same
If they
time,
were
I
being
would,
honest.
well, what I'm trying to say is, if they believe that, then they can get the hell out of my country. You see what I'm saying? Because that is the total opposite of the United States Constitution, and it's an invader ideology. And suddenly they're
Well,
no longer
you know
spiritual.
what? I think the First Amendment is actually a Muslim thing. You do have a
Okay,
White House
that's
Quran that was
that.
owned by
How
Thomas
so?
Jefferson.
Like freedom of speech.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran says, there is no compulsion in belief. Truth stands clear from error.
Okay.
And and there are many hints of in George Washington's valedictory speech about religion and how we must, with caution, indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. And Washington was not a Christian.
No, I know. A deist, I think, is my understanding. Uh,
Yes,
that
well, in the sense that they rejected this wholesale imposition of having to believe that Jesus is God, or be burnt at the stake, or suffer some, financial or penalty or lowering of status, which is what happened in the old world.
hmm. Well, I don't know. This is tough. See, we're in this gray area between what the book says and how people act and all these things, and it's these are valid points and important discussions, but it's tough because you have theory and practice. You have,
Mm.
again, like the way Muslims behave in our countries versus what their books tell them to do. So if there's anything spiritual and holy in Islam, I sure wish that they would practice it and,
Well,
go back to their homelands.
yes, I understand, but the thing about Sharia, I mean, Islam, is that it's a car without an engine. If it's only optional to do what the Quran says, it can't be optional just to follow the Ten Commandments, say. It has to be enforced. Otherwise, people will exercise the option not to follow it.
So here's the difference between the West and the East, or Abrahamic religions, Eastern thought. It has to be enforced. Now listen to what you're saying. It's enforced by God, it's enforced by the state, it's enforced by the religious leaders, it's enforced by the father in the home, or I'll throw acid on your face or whatever. I don't know what the enforcement is. Whereas in the East, it's if you it's karma. You what you did, you get back. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad. There's no enforcement system other than natural law. You see, if
Of,
I
of cause and effect.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, vengeance
So
is also an effect of
okay, here
injustice.
let me say something. When I was becoming friends with that Egyptian Arabic teacher, we had some wonderful conversations, and he was explaining Islam to me, and I was saying, in Christianity we consider ourselves the children of God, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, in Islam we consider ourselves the slaves of God." And that went right through me like, whoa. It was a wave that went through me because I thought, imagine how different you would think of yourselves and form a whole society on the concept that you're God's slave. So rather than his children. And I mean, I don't know if all Muslims agree with that.
I
That's what,
think Jews are supposed to think of themselves as such. I mean,
wow.
they try to, pussyfoot up around the subject, but I
Yeah.
guess if
Yeah.
you really believed in God, then you would have to obey all his laws, including,
Okay.
um, whom you are or aren't supposed to have sex
Okay.
with. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I guess that would,
Well,
if you restrain
to
yourself,
me,
you are kind of
to me,
acknowledged.
that's a deal breaker. That's a deal breaker because I mean, to me, I can't not describe how backwards and sickening it is to think of yourself as a slave, as that's your the meaning. Like you're born into slavery, you'll die a slave. You're the slave of God.
People sell themselves into slavery for security, to have a roof over their head
I
and
think
food in
that's
their belly.
that's
You might consider
spiritually
selling yourself into slavery, I guess,
that's
if you're
see
homeless.
that's spiritually immature. Like to not be able to make your own freedom, but to sell yourself into slavery for security. That's essentially the Democrat Party's whole trick is that, oh, you're in danger from the coronavirus, you better sell off your freedoms. You know what I'm saying? It's a dark way of seeing yourself and society. So that's why I don't know, I can't jive with it. I won't go that way.
Mhm. But it
We're
depends on who your master is. It really
so
did.
again, English language, like
Maybe the Abrahamic God is a better master than Democratic Party.
so okay, like in the East, when you use the term master, it's not let's like you're the slave. That doesn't mean that. It means that person has mastered the practice.
Yeah,
So he's an expert. He should actually be called expert instead of master. Because
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Now
yeah.
you naturally would be humble in front of the master, because you want them to teach you. You want to attain their level of
Mhm,
expertise in kung fu, qigong, Buddhism, Taoism, whatever the alchemy is.
mhm.
So, where rather than like, oh God, I'm your child. I'm too stupid and wayward to know what to do. Help me. And we are stupid and wayward. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm tragically ill-equipped to cope with things, and a lot of us are. We need God's grace. I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, if we define ourselves that way, we're limiting ourselves, and that I think goes against the
Do you
Western
think so?
biospirit. That
I
goes
mean, it
against
has
our.
been said that if you acknowledge the Abrahamic God and obey his laws, you only have one God, one boss. I mean, you only have one boss, and that's it. You just follow his instructions, and apparently you'll be okay in this life, or if not, the next.
Well, I mean, this life's pretty damn scary. I mean, you've got everything, the elements, foreign nations, just getting what you want. I mean, it's hard. Like the Buddha said, life is suffering. And so it's wonderful that God gives us his grace And and there's nothing wrong with any of that. I'm not knocking that, but it's about conception of yourself and how you interrelate with, what type of spirituality do you have? So I think I'll say this, like, the people who have the greatest faith in God, and the Christians that I know, are the happiest people that I've met, and they're the nicest people, the most spiritual, fulfilled people I've met. They're simple people. They're simpletons in a way, but I'm like, it seems like God favors them over
Well,
the
but
intellectuals.
you can see the source of their contentment. It's like I'm content to follow God's laws, whatever
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
But
yeah.
if you aren't in that mindset, you think, well, I'm only here to aggrandize myself, to
Hmm.
look after number one, and then you'd
Hmm.
be thinking, should I have done that or shouldn't I have done that? Should I have, oh, maybe I did the wrong thing, and
Yeah,
whatever, and you could drive yourself mad because
yeah.
there's so many options that you could have,
So to circle back around to the topic of karma and manifestation, faith is karma and manifestation in a much more direct way. When the more you're in the spiritual state of absolute confidence in God's way and your relationship to God, then bang bang bang, you manifest things like by the minute. It's beautiful and powerful, and it then would give you that childlike innocence and happiness and contentment. You're in the Garden of Eden, per se. So it's
You've
this.
kept things simple for yourself by following the rules as you understand them. I think, and you
Well,
think, oh, and I get the spirituality too because I follow the laws, and even if I suffer, it's for a good cause, or something like that.
okay.
You would
I
have these thoughts inside your head rather than, damn, I
Okay.
did the wrong thing, and
Here's the thing.
and
I don't.
I'm not looking after number one so well, and I'm feeling, even though I married my prince, I'm feeling suicidal, and I have to, get my husband out of Britain into America and live like an ordinary citizen. I don't know, whatever rich people, they are quite neurotic when you think about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's not conflate following the rules with faith. I think that they're following the rules is, in a sense, it's sort of like the Confucianism of Christianity. It's, here are the laws for a stable society and a stable family. That's great, fine. Faith is your direct relationship with God. And that to me is this, that's material versus spiritual here in a discussion. We are material beings. We have to live in the material world, but we need a divine relationship. And divinity is our true nature. Divinity is our true life within this manifestation in the material world. So I'm hopping back and forth across this fence here, right? So following the rules is not going to per se give you a stronger spiritual life. It might be good for society and your family, and I'm sure there's good karma that will come from it. But faith, and now, so okay, in the Pure Land Buddhism that I talked about earlier, that's a faith-based version of Buddhism. There's many kinds of Buddhism. I've practiced Tibetan Buddhism for 10 years. I was initiated into the Yamantaka practice by the translator of the Dalai Lama. I have, like, this is a whole other world of conversation that is just too long and deep to go into now. But, you know, faith, getting back to that, is a thing. And I don't know, it's interesting. That's a topic that I think maybe we should talk about more, or people should think about more and practice more. How do you practice faith? How do you practice innocence? It's like the more you intellectualize God, the farther you get from him. So
Well, I
it's
think faith is
crazy.
just the choice to believe that something will end well rather than end badly, and
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like, I have faith, when my father was alive, for example, I have faith, or had faith, that he would always look after me and do what was best for me. And I knew that he'd be there when I fell. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so, like, that is a kind of like a childlike comfort, that you're safe and you're comfortable, and there is never a question. I mean, you don't, in a sense, don't even know what faith is, because you have it, you live in it. It's like, you know you swim in it, it's all around you. And so, my mother, for example, is that person. And it's crazy because her she manifests like insanely. She wouldn't call it manifestation because that's too like new agey, you know.
Hmm.
But like, oh God, I lost my keys. Bing, pops right up, or just dumb little things like that. I know that's kind of silly as an example, but like, she's so happy, and I'm like, it's weird. Yeah, you have to somehow have an innocence, but I don't know if this is getting off topic or what.
No, no. I mean, I think people talk about children expecting things to end well. I mean,
Mm,
to the extent that they might be told off for having too high an expectation of humanity and
mm,
society.
mhm. Maybe with faith we can see the kingdom of God on earth. Maybe with faith, I would say that Zen meditation burns off that negative ego mentality, and then you return to an organic, simple, almost childlike uh, way of being, and that allows the divine to come through much easier. Because we're getting in the way of ourselves. Our ego is standing between us and the divine.
I think with faith we have the courage to defend whatever principles we think we ought to defend. I think that's the whole purpose, or undertake some risky venture, rather than be risk averse cattle that are regarded as so many units of
Yeah,
consumption
yeah.
by people who regard us as cattle.
Hmm. It's
Mm.
fascinating stuff. I mean, these topics are I find them very
Can be
enjoyable. But
revisited.
yeah, but there's a lot of like ambiguity, and there's this vastness of the of the topics that it can get a little amorphic.
Mm.
But so I didn't
Yeah.
know if you had any more questions regarding.
No, no, I think we've been quite wide ranging. Thank you for
Okay.
giving me nearly 3 hours of your time.
Oh God, I was thinking the poor audience. This is too long.
Well, when they listen, they can always break off or, play it with double speed, at double speed or something, or skip through bits of it. Uh, I wonder what they will say. Um,
Hmm. Well, it'll be
uh,
something new.
will your mother listen to this?
Will she listen to this? She would, but I feel like I don't want to distract her from her own faith. She's fine as she is. She doesn't.
Mm.
I have to simplify things for people who are, if I meet a Christian who is really comfortable and, you know, a true Christian, I guess, in the sense of the best sense of the word, I won't bother them with like ideas of Buddhism or Hermeticism or things that just, you're happy, you found your way, you're connected to the divine. Who am I to tell you anything? I don't want to confuse you or throw you off balance. I won't do that.
No, no.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Right.
well, well, thank you again, and I'm sure we will have many topics to discuss in the future if that's what you'd like to do.
Well, I hope I have something to say.
All right then. Thank you again for your
Love.
time.
Yeah, and thank you to the audience for sticking around.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Okay. Bye.